foot race. Touchdown, Buffalo.
Helper still on his feet. To the goal line. Touchdown, Cleveland.
It's intercepted. Down the sideline. Smith, the pick six for Roquan Smith.
Caught. Henry Ruggs is gone. Touchdown, Raiders.
Wide open receiver. K.J. Osborne. Touchdown, Minnesota.
Looking deep. He's got a man. Lockett. Touchdown.
Murray looks long. Rondale Moore, the left-hand touchdown, Arizona.
One-hander. Patterson is in for the touchdown.
Welcome in, everyone, to the Lucky Shots podcast. I am Ricky Larson. Dustin is back, joining me today for the show. Excuse me. Again, if you are watching the show on YouTube, you can hop over to any of our podcast links. All of those are actually in the header of our YouTube. And if you're listening to the show and you want to watch it, hop on over to YouTube and you can see it there. Again, all the headers are all the links are in the channel header or on our Twitter and Facebook bios. So we're covering news, the top players from last week, some winners and losers, a peek at waivers, and then all of the weekly preview. But again, want to give Dustin an opportunity to talk about his show, Caught in the Current. So how's that going for you?
No, it's going great. I mean, we've continued to grow every single week so far. We're just about to the 500 listen threshold. So really hitting milestones here, and we really like to see it. But that's the cool thing, is it's not just a matter of, oh, hey, we have listens, we're another podcast. We've got a whole central point to it, and ultimately, we have a lot of fun. We go through some, the stupidest things we saw on the internet that week. We do some irrationally angry stuff, just talk about things that we got to get off our chest that are just kind of out of nowhere, but those are always a good time. So we have good fun discussions. We do a Mount Rushmore draft because of our tie to South Dakota here, just a snake style top 4 draft. Whoever wins the previous week, we've done a poll from our Facebook at Caught in the Current. You get to pick the category, and you're picking first the next week.
There you go.
A lot of fun to go with there. But like I said, ultimately the central point of it is that every single listen that we can get across all of our platforms, and we're posted pretty much anywhere you can find or listen to a podcast. Every listen equates into a cent donated to a charity every single week. And we just got done donating to the American Heart Association, and that was about $45 as well that we just sent their way. And that is on top of a $120 donation that my great uncle is actually putting towards them.
Oh, very nice.
So he added on. He had his own thing going on. He decided for his birthday he wanted to do that, and really cool thing. So we decided to add on to that and putting in money towards a good cause. But like I said, all you have to do to take part, you don't have to reach into your wallet or anything. All you have to do is listen in, and you're making a part. So Caught in the Current, anywhere you can find it: Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts.
And then when can they listen to that again?
So we release every Wednesday. We usually do our recordings. Try to do them on Mondays, but yeah, every Wednesday. So actually later today, we're recording today, but later today on Wednesday today it'll be out.
Alrighty, very nice. So go listen to them. Going towards a good cause, give you a good laugh. Nick, one of the other people on that podcast, showed me your guys' whole rant about that one guy's daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately couldn't be aired, but it was,
but
the outtakes are almost as good as the show.
Oh, for sure, and it's all great content, good to listen to. Definitely can brighten your day as well.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, let's hop into the news from this past week. We'll start with Derek Carr, who is going to be questionable for Sunday versus the Dolphins. He underwent an MRI on his ankle. I don't believe I saw any news regarding whether or not he is good or not good or how that's going to go.
Rappaport said this morning he's good to play.
Good to play?
Yeah, well expected to play, I should say.
Right.
Yes.
So that's a good sign. He's actually been doing some great stuff for fantasy football this year, and as an actual football player, those Raiders are 2-0. Better look out.
Who would have thunk?
Yeah, it's crazy. The AFC West, normally run by the Chiefs, they're 1-1. Broncos and Raiders both 2-0.
Yep.
Chiefs are overrated. That's what we're gonna go with. Carson Wentz of course, this guy can't stay healthy, and he is probably the only person I've heard of that sprained both of his ankles in Sunday's game. He's questionable for Sunday versus the Titans as well. If he is not a go, then it's going to be Jacob Eason, I believe. Yep. So if you have any stock in the Colts, I'd just sit all of it, regardless of your position.
Play Taylor. They'll need to run. They'll have to dump down to him. Probably Hines too, honestly.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't trust Jonathan Taylor.
I'm not huge
I love him as a actual player, but
yeah.
Fantasy wise, especially this year so far, just these first 2 games, he hasn't really done a whole lot.
Yeah, I
but
you
know, like you said, maybe in this kind of a game situation, it might benefit him at most. Then you have Tua Tagovailoa. He's day-to-day with a rib injury. Any extra news on that you've heard?
As far as I know, he's still feeling a pretty good amount of pain. Right. So that doesn't necessarily change his status, but another day forward, and he's still kind of feeling it, which is pretty expected.
Right.
If you watch the hit, it was pretty gross, and really kind of put through how much they need help on the right tackle there, because
for sure.
that was bad. I saw someone put a stop clock to it, and it was 1.97 seconds is all it took for the end to get around.
Yeah, that gives you absolutely no time to get the ball away and throw it.
Yeah.
Maybe later on when we're actually looking at the games, I might have put down who his replacement will be. I think it's Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah.
So I don't think that will bode well for the Dolphins, but if Tua is also banged up, you don't want him out there.
Yeah.
Tyrod Taylor was placed on IR with a hamstring injury. This is going to put Davis Mills in as the starter, and they play the Panthers on Thursday, so short week. Davis Mills is a rookie, correct?
Yep, he is.
Yeah, so a rookie making his first start against a Panthers defense that's looking really good.
As odd as it is, he was their first pick, but it was in the 3rd round. They just didn't have the first 2 picks.
So we'll see how that goes. I think the Panthers are a defense that you can plug in this week and reap the benefits from that. Moving on to Andy Dalton, had a knee injury. There's a possible chance he doesn't play, but Matt Nagy came out and said, if he's good, he's going to play, he's going to be our starter. Justin Fields...
Well, he said as long as he's healthy, he's playing.
Right. So Justin Fields would be the starter if Dalton was not able to go. We got to see a little bit of Justin Fields last week. Looked a bit like a rookie should in a first full game, but he didn't get a whole lot of help. A lot of drops. Protection wasn't the best for him, so hopefully if he is going to play this week, or if Andy Dalton misses an extended amount of time, that cleans up.
Yeah, latest report from NFL Network, Tom Pelissero said he is considered week to week and appears unlikely to start the game this week against the Browns.
All right.
So planning on whatever you're gonna accommodate for with having Justin Fields started.
Here's an idea: Justin Fields, now looking like the projected starter. There are some quarterbacks on certain teams. I know my team with Justin Herbert has been struggling mightily just because he's putting up a lot of yards but not scoring. Mm-hmm. Is Justin Fields somebody that you would think about tossing in if you have even somebody like Ryan Tannehill who hasn't been producing fantasy-wise?
I don't think I can until I see it, and I haven't seen it with him yet. We can get into that further when we get to the game, but sure. I have my doubts.
Gotcha. Moving on to the running back position, Darrell Henderson had a rib cartilage injury. The team is optimistic, but they will be checking back on Friday to have an update on whether or not he will go. Sony Michel now is somebody to think about, possibly, depending on what your running back room looks like. If it looks like mine, Sony Michel might be an option. Then we hop into the 49ers backfield. it's a mess.
Yep.
You got Jermichael Hasty out with a high ankle sprain. He's for sure out Sunday night versus the Packers. Probably more time after that as well, with it being a high ankle sprain and not just a normal ankle sprain. So we'll have to monitor that. Elijah Mitchell, day-to-day with a shoulder injury, and then Trey Sermon, questionable with a concussion. Probably there's not any more news on that.
Yeah, nothing real developing. Concussions, unfortunately, take a while, and he took a pretty nasty spear on that. I wouldn't expect Sermon this week. I would, however, personally just expect Elijah Mitchell. I feel like he's going to be fine, good enough. Even if he doesn't get the full-on workload, he's going to have enough to be a majority. But we'll see how that shoulder goes, if it turns out to be more of a stinger or more of a long-term effect. And also just some breaking news here. Tua is officially out for Sunday, and his ribs are fractured.
Ooh. So more than likely, not just this week that he will be out.
Yes, could be a 2 to 3 week, I would say, maybe 2 to 4.
Yeah.
But we'll see if he's coming back with the old flak jacket.
Yeah, and now the outlook looking less and less great for the Dolphins. Laviska Shenault Jr. injured his shoulder on Sunday versus the Broncos. He is expected to play against the Cardinals, so good news for the Jags, I guess, still having most of their receivers out there. Trevor Lawrence is not a guy that's looking good either right now. Jarvis Landry was placed on the IR with an MCL injury. We'll get more into what that means for the Browns later on. And then Bradley Chubb is undergoing an arthroscopic procedure on his ankle today, actually, while we're recording it is Wednesday. And it's a thing that, honestly, because it's bone spurs, and it's something that could have been taken care of a lot sooner, to where, he was in and out the last 2 weeks. I don't think he played at all week 1. This got taken care of in the preseason. We'd be around the time frame of him starting to come back and being, more, being on the field.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Von Miller, though, has been looking great regardless. 3 sacks the past 2 weeks, and that Broncos defense is looking fine. So,
yeah, it'll just be what sounds like 7 to 8 weeks for Chubb.
Yeah, and they just lost Josie Jewell as well. So, Broncos IR is looking a little crowded, but I think they'll be all right. They have the Jets this week.
Yeah, so, take some time off.
For sure. Any other news that you have seen? Anything
Ben Roethlisberger is dealing with a pec injury right now. Something to watch for. It didn't say anything real significant. Didn't say he knew how it even happened. He just brought it out just yesterday, as it wasn't even brought up post-game.
Right.
So something to monitor there. It's not necessarily a huge deal. He said he was feeling some soreness about a week ago after live tackling practice, and it's not like it's a lingering thing. He's claiming, just again, the old Ben Roethlisberger bumps and bruises come with football.
Right.
But something to monitor.
Well,
I wouldn't necessarily change a ton. I would still anticipate him to be out there, but perhaps hinder a little bit if you're between him and someone else in terms of who you're going to start for the week.
Right.
Maybe edge otherwise.
Yeah, I would more than likely, even if he is healthy, the way the Steelers' offense has looked the past couple of weeks, I'd steer towards anybody else, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's real sad because they've got 3 really good receivers that you want to see do well. And
well, that's the thing, too, is with Deontay Johnson's injury, too, that doesn't help either.
Yeah.
But also, Jarvis Landry on the Browns, he's now put on the IR, will miss at least 3 games with a knee injury.
At least 3. Mm-hmm. So the short-term IR, at least.
Yep.
Which is good news for the Browns, at least. Yeah, and then we'll hop more into Jarvis Landry's injury and what that means for the Browns a little later. But right now we're going to hop into the top players from last week. Again, the top quarterback was Kyler Murray. I am reaping the benefits of almost accidentally taking him in the 5th round. He's been the top quarterback the last 2 weeks. He had 33.1 points, 400 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air, and 2 interceptions, 5 carries, 31 yards, and a touchdown. Besides the 2 interceptions and making that game close, I mean, he's looked super good and has helped me go to a 2-0 record in that league. So
there you go.
I'm appreciative. Derrick Henry, King Henry, nearly 50 points this last week, 47.7, carried the rock 35 times, had 182 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns. And then something you don't see from Derrick Henry, 6 catches for 55 yards. Just tremendous, and especially from a Titans offense that significantly struggled week 1. That's exactly what you wanted to see this week, at least from one of them, and of course it would be Derrick Henry. Does this make his value go up because of 6 receptions?
I mean, in theory, yeah, but it's a matter of I would need to see this for 2 or 3 games personally. Right. But yeah, I mean, if you're ready to smack the overreaction button on Derrick Henry, even more than not to say he's overrated by any means, but I'm saying if you're taking him, mid round of that first round of your draft, if you're trying to really pump him up to get up to that 3rd, maybe 2nd pick, the best thing you could do if you're going to be doing that would be to try to trade him.
Yeah,
that's just me.
I mean,
if you can go and get him and try and make a package deal for McCaffrey, then great.
Yeah, he's a guy that has been knocked in most PPR leagues because he doesn't get that work. So if this is a consistent thing, dear Lord, Derrick Henry's going to be a scary guy.
I will also note that it doesn't help that Darrington Evans has not played yet because he was on short-term IR to begin the year. So as he comes back, that could even get down to 2 or 3 a game, which isn't real much different than anything he's had before.
Right. But again, a workhorse, that guy.
Yeah, he does it all.
And I'll get into something cool I saw about him later when we talk about the Titans. Moving on to the top wide receiver, Cooper Kupp. He sank me in a league. Just absolutely demolished. Had 36.8 points. That came on 11 targets, 9 catches, 163 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He also had a carry for -5 yards, but whatever, Still the top receiver.
I won't drop him over it.
And two weeks in a row now, he's been the top guy for the Rams in terms of targets and receptions. I'm not sure if he was outscored week 1 by Van Jefferson because of that long touchdown.
It was probably close at least, which is something that would bring me back into that. I wouldn't be worried about him anyway.
Okay.
Van Jefferson had just 1 for 14 off 3 targets this week, so if anything, not consistent.
He seems pretty irrelevant when it comes to somebody you would need to start.
Yeah, fairly harmless at the moment.
Yeah. And then back at tight end 1, not really a shock, Travis Kelce, 23.9 points, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 109 yards, and a touchdown. What was shocking is how that game ended and how the Chiefs just handed it back to the Ravens. And we will get into somebody else in that receiving core when we get down to the losers. But right now, we're going to hop into the winners. So, not the top guys, but guys who had huge weeks, and some of them, you definitely didn't expect it. First one is Daniel Jones. He had 29.46 fantasy points, 22 for 32, 250 yards, a touchdown through the air, 9 carries for 95 yards on the ground, and a touchdown there as well. That was a Thursday night game, and I had to play Washington's defense. I thought it was going to be a smash defensive play, and then
surprise.
The Giants come out and Daniel Jones looks like a MVP candidate. And that was just a weird game,
They're always
Washington
close, though.
throwing the ball 50 times.
Yeah, I mean that's always how it is with those teams. That divisional matchup, as it is always tight. Among almost any division, you see the Steelers and Ravens play a lot.
Yeah.
But when you get into those two teams, the Giants and the Washington football team, never not a duel.
Right. all of those games in that division really end up that way.
Honestly, yeah.
Which, to me, makes it one of the more enjoyable divisions to watch, even though they're all probably one of the worst divisions.
Yeah, it's not exactly competitive for a good reason most times, but at least this one was.
But still good to good entertainment for football. Then you saw Aaron Jones, in my opinion, one of the most underutilized backs the past few years, with Jamal Williams being on the team. They gave him that workhorse mentality. In this game, he had 41.5 points, 17 carries for 67 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. Then he had 6 receptions for 48 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. Kind of hurt my feelings. I had Devontae Adams, who didn't get a touchdown. He still got, a lot of receptions and still won me by a week. But last year, you saw a lot of those short touchdown passes to Devontae Adams, and this week they just all went to Aaron Jones.
Yep.
Good to see that happen for him and the Packers. Huge bounce back week. Again, it was against the Lions, but
yeah. Well, you've seen a couple of these games every year with Aaron Jones. You can think back to the Cowboys game last year when Aaron Jones had, I believe, 4 touchdowns again, but they were all rushing. Same thing. He's going to have those types of games. It's a high caliber offense. It's a low caliber division oftentimes they're playing, so I wouldn't be surprised by him. He's got as high of a ceiling as you can find.
Yeah, and you'd love to see that happen from week to week because he is that kind of caliber of player.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you had Cortland Sutton for the Denver Broncos. I was happy to see this. He's finally back and in full form, it looked like. 24.9 points, 12 targets, 9 catches, 159 yards. Didn't get a touchdown. But he looked back to old form, looked exactly like the top receiver that this team needs. Kind of that Demaryius Thomas role from Peyton Manning's days. Which, speaking of, what happened to Demaryius Thomas ever?
He got traded to the Jets and then retired.
Disappeared.
Yep.
As
one does.
Peyton Manning retired, and
it's all over.
You never saw him.
Yeah.
Same with the other Thomas, Julius Thomas. He went to the Jaguars at one point, and then...
Yep, Jaguars and Texans.
Yeah, and then he just fell off. Just a nod to how great Peyton Manning is. But then at the tight end position, this one is probably the biggest no-name how is he one of the top 5 tight ends this week. But Max Williams for the Arizona Cardinals, he had 16.4 points. 7 for 7, 7 targets, 7 receptions, and 94 yards. Kyler was looking his way quite a bit. I think it's because their offensive line doesn't look great. He was running all over the place, and Max Williams just a big target, sitting in the middle of the field because the defense isn't ready for a guy that doesn't catch the ball ever. And
that's the thing is
he
had, I believe, just 1 catch in the first game. He was at 1 target. He had 0 for 1, 0 yards, obviously all the way through. So you've seen him be a target before. I mean, even back when he was with the Ravens, he was a guy that when he played, he certainly could have been. He's just never been consistently in that point, whether that's his fault or the quarterback's fault. Either way. But even dating back to the college days at Minnesota, you remember that's what really sprung him into that draft the year. So he's worth a flyer. I wouldn't put him as your number 1 waiver. And if he's still there, then maybe take him. But if you need a stream, why not? Give it a shot.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't rely on too much consistency there.
And maybe coming off a week like this, fresh in Kyler's mind, hey, this guy was a good target last week. Maybe he still get some runoff.
Yeah.
This coming week at least.
Yeah.
And it's kind of good to see Arizona spreading the ball out from just DeAndre Hopkins.
He only had 4 targets
last week,
and that's what I say. I wouldn't expect the norm of Max Williams having more targets than Hopkins.
Right. Especially I've got that stack in that same league that I've got Kyler,
so
I need those more targets. But especially this week, I've got a tight matchup coming up. Projected, the scoring's weird, but projected 170 for my opponent, 169 for me. So.
Oh yeah, you're primed.
It's gonna be a good week. Moving on to the losers. Or do you have other winners you wanna talk about?
Terry McLaurin 14 targets in the game against the Giants with a backup quarterback. Everybody was just expecting him to kind of die off there. Don't play any football players, football team players. Kind of a worry about even Gibson from some people there. But if you rolled him out, congratulations. Or if you felt like you needed to, like me, then congratulations. 11 for 107 with a touchdown to go with it. I mean, the guy was insane.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big bout of confidence that even if Fitzpatrick is out, they're going to be just fine. If Fitzpatrick's in, we saw him last week succeed as well. I think it's going to be a really good year for McLaurin, and I wouldn't say it was just he caught a touchdown the first week and he's going to be good now and pedal to the metal on McLaurin. I think this really gave him a huge bout of confidence going forward. And then also just on the other side of the field there, Sterling Shepard, 9 for 94, 10 targets, his second week in leading receiving for the Giants.
Yeah.
I think he's a big PPR steal. If you can somehow still get him in any league, he needs to be rostered, if not starting on your team right now. And then I also had just honestly Aaron Rodgers. I mean, not that we didn't expect it, but there was a lot of worry about him after that first week and just the Packers in general. And after that first drive, even it was looking a little tough when the Lions marched right up the field and Rodgers needed to retaliate.
Yeah.
So the pressure's been there, but if you expect anyone in the NFL to respond under pressure, it better be Aaron Rodgers, and he certainly came through in a big way. And then tight end on the other side, it's the same game still. T.J. Hawkinson, 8 for 66 with a touchdown. He was open. He made a great catch in the end zone. I mean, he's being a big-bodied force for Jared Goff, who traditionally hasn't used tight end a ton, if you think back to his Rams days. Good things, all those guys trending upwards for sure.
For sure. And it makes it easier on him when the tight end is, one, really good, and two, they don't have a whole lot of other targets. So, works out both ways for those guys. So moving on to the losers now. Just some stinky poo-poo these guys were. Dak Prescott, not necessarily a bad stat line, but it didn't help you in fantasy and made the game with the Chargers less alluring. It wasn't necessarily all that fun to watch. He was 23 of 27 for 237. No touchdowns at all and an interception. So if you started him this last week, he only got 7.48 points. Definitely hurts, especially from week one where he was one of the top scorers to being, bottom tier this last week. Definitely hurt you. Alvin Kamara, he hurt my feelings. He only got 7 points. 8 carries, 5 yards, 4 catches, and 25 yards. No scores, no big plays. Saints offense, are we worried about that?
I think it's too early to worry considering what we saw in the first week.
But yardage-wise, they still didn't have a lot.
But I do think there's room for concern. I wouldn't necessarily smack the panic button yet.
Right. Yeah, and it's still Alvin Kamara,
Yep, yeah, exactly.
He's going to have have weeks like this, but he'll have more upside weeks than weeks like this. Tyreek Hill. I needed about 40 from him, which is never impossible when you're playing Tyreek Hill. He only got 5.9 on 4 targets, 3 catches, 14 yards, and 1 carry for 15. Everything went to Kelsey, and there honestly didn't look like a lot to go around, and especially late in that game, the Chiefs just handed it to the Ravens.
Unfortunately, quite literally.
Yeah, it was tough. And then Dallas Goedert, a guy who you figured would have a bigger week than he did because there was no Zach Ertz, a big tight end target. He only had 2 targets, 2 catches, and 24 yards for 4.4 points. And that game it wasn't like the offense is just. It was a weird game. Yeah,
it was an odd stall for a while, and all of a sudden both teams are just going at it. Yeah. It was a weird stall and then going at it. So it oddly ended up that it was just kind of the last drive wins.
Right.
It's just a matter of if you fumble on the last drive, then you're going to lose.
Yeah, exactly. Some losers for you.
So I don't necessarily have a ton of super glaring ones. I would say don't be in a point going into week 3 where you're desperate enough still to try and start Brandon Ayuk. You need to sit there and wait on him. It's probably going to be worth it, I would say, but there's a lot that's going on right now that we just don't know because he's still trying to deal with the hamstring injury. Coach has come out and said that it's not a matter of playing time of, he's not practicing well or he's not playing good, he lost his spot. Obviously, a hamstring is one of the most lingering injuries in sports, so hang tight is the best thing you can say with him, but don't find yourself in a point where you have to be that desperate to still try and play him for the boom points.
Well, and I like the situation, and we'll talk about it a little later for going out throughout the season.
Another one that I had just purely off of the anticipation of what people wanted coming in, O.J. Howard is not going to be the move this year. I'm sorry. Rob Gronkowski is coming out, and he's not just saying like, I'm going to block, or I'm just going to be kind of a, I'll catch one catch with a touchdown just because Brady will throw it to me, but otherwise that's my only catch. I mean, he's coming out. He had an explosive game last week. He had 4 for 39 with 2 touchdowns again this week. O.J. Howard just got his first reception this week, actually, at 1 for 21. He's not going to be the move. He's not going to be splitting time with Gronk. Stop relying on that. It's not the O.J. Howard of 3 years ago where he was able to flash that talent. And even if he still has that, there's a lot to be able to show, and obviously a lot to even to get over the hump of any sort of playing time cutting into Gronk when he's playing like that. And same with Ronald Jones. I mean, we're conscious of that. But even at the same concept, too, Leonard Fournette is not doing much to keep me into that. He had 4 receptions, so that's great, too. But again, very desperation points there if you're looking for anything in starting Fournette or Jones right now.
Yeah, that whole backfield is just something to stay away from. I still sadly have Jones rostered in a league. Just holding on, hoping,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if Fournette goes down, you've got just opportunity. It may not be good, but you still got opportunity there. That's 90% of fantasy football, but I'm curious to see how the Bucs go from playing a lackluster defense in Dallas and Atlanta to some pretty solid defensive secondaries in the Rams and the Patriots coming up here, and even Miami after that. Eagles aren't going to be easy. The Bears after that. New Orleans, the Washington football team. I mean, he's got a run of this. Could be a very interesting time to maybe look at trading Tom Brady, if I say so myself.
Hot take right there. Yeah, I mean, it's because I do have the Rams defense. Mm-hmm. Not sure I want to play them.
It's risky,
but I don't know, how Tampa's offense is going to play against a good defense. Yep. So it's just something we'll have to wait and see. And if they go out and tear up the Rams defense, then
I wouldn't be surprised.
It'll be scary.
Yeah,
I
wouldn't be surprised by any means, but a little bit more risk involved there.
Right. Any other losers for you?
That's pretty much all I got off the top of my head.
All right, we'll hop into a quick waivers segment. I've only got 3 names on here, and waivers ran this morning, so again, probably irrelevant for time that we are airing this show. But at quarterback, I have Derek Carr. He's banged up, but he's going to be fine. And these first 2 weeks, he's been incredible. He's got 817 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. Averaging about 24 points. He's outscored my starting quarterback in 2 different leagues. So, he's not a slouch at all.
Yep, no, he's not a joke.
He's only 22% rostered in ESPN leagues. That's where I will get my rostered stats from there. Yeah. But solid guy to pick up, and especially with some other guys who aren't necessarily performing fantastic. He's a decent plug-in option. And
yes, might as well see what happens with him.
And he's played, not slouch defenses. I wouldn't say that the Ravens are a slouch defense at all. And then last week, I'm blanking on who they played.
He played. I have to look as well. Sorry, Raiders, be more relevant. It's the Steelers.
The Steelers. And the Steelers defense, we saw what they did to Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills offense.
Yep.
So playing well against pretty decent defenses. So intriguing to watch. He normally has flash games like this, but being that it's beginning of the season against those kind of defenses, I think he's somebody that you should go ahead and put on your roster. And if your starting quarterback continues not to play well or has a bad matchup, he's somebody you could put in. This one is a go for him at your own risk type of guy. Cordero Patterson. He's only 14.7% rostered. Last week he had 7 carries for 11 yards and a touchdown, 5 catches, 58 yards, and a receiving touchdown. My biggest thing here is I also have Mike Davis in a league. They're seeing about the same amount of snap share, and Patterson is doing more with it.
It's even worse than you'd expect, actually. Davis is putting up 64, and Patterson's only 33 going into this last week.
Really?
75 and 33 the last week there. I know the numbers don't add up, but some they were in on 2 back sets on some of those. It's a little bit more of a discrepancy than you would think, which I think is pretty misleading. So if you can get him and trade him right away, or you have him already, again, ride the hype while you can. I don't think he's going to be a bad play if you absolutely were that desperate. Right. But there's far, far better plays, and I think if you can pump that value, then sure. Because ultimately, Davis didn't have that bad of a game. In comparison of his 9 for 38, Patterson was 7 for 11 rushing. Yeah, he fell into the end zone. But you get into the receiving side. Oh, but he had, Patterson that has had 5 for 58, fell into the end zone again. Great, that's going to happen. You can't predict that. Davis also had 7 receptions for what it is, too. Yeah, it was 25 yards. Yeah. Didn't get to do much with it, but that's still 7 automatic points that you got there with 7 targets going his way. Even at that split, I think it's a lot more imaginary of a split than most people are thinking, too. So I am ready to pump the brakes on Patterson. But again, it's a speculative ad. If you're in a super deep league or anything, take the shot, but do something with it.
Yeah, if you went 0 RB like me and you're just hating your life, he's not terrible to look at.
In that case, like I said, if you're that point of desperation, it might be worth a look in a flex.
Yeah, and first 2 weeks he hasn't looked, god awful, like inefficient as he was in Chicago.
And they play the Giants this week, and they've not necessarily had as strong of a defense as last year. So far, they were kind of more of a second half surge. If you remember how good the Giants defense surprisingly was last year, but also keeping in mind that was largely in the pass defense side too.
Well, and I would like to know why everybody is scared of the Giants' run defense. I get that they have a really good defensive tackle, but nobody's choosing to run against them these first 2 weeks, which is very annoying, especially when you throw the ball 50 times with a backup quarterback and you decide to throw the ball in the last 2 minutes. That whole game, I had to rant about it to my dad afterwards. I was like, this is ridiculous.
Yep.
And then one more at wide receiver. He's seeing a lot of action, actually. KJ Osborne for Minnesota. He's only 12.1% rostered. Has 15 targets, 12 catches, 167 yards, and a touchdown over the first 2 weeks. Not like super behind Jefferson and Thielen when it comes to targets. And, he's getting a healthy share. I think he is almost taking over what Irv Smith would be having.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And, you valued Irv Smith as a tight end.
Yep.
So I think you can also value KJ Osborne, not as a wide receiver 1 or 2, but he's a very good flex option.
I'd agree.
And gets the decent amount of targets, so for sure. And then you got any other waivers that you would hop into?
I was just looking to, again, depending on how desperate you are at tight end, we already talked about Max Williams, but Jack Doyle could be worth a speculative ad as well.
Yeah.
Had a pretty solid week for what it's worth.
And that was with Eason coming in, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
So, I was going to say, maybe not with a backup quarterback.
If you're talking that short game again, it could be worth that shot. I mean, 75% snap share when you're talking about being compared to Mo Alley Cox. Put up 8 targets and with 5 receptions for 64 yards. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and be the Jack Doyle of old again, but Again, you can't deny the opportunity, and you can't deny the target share there.
Right. Speaking of Mo Alley Cox, he's a guy I want to turn into something just because I love him. And
so much potential, but it's that same thing every year.
I listen to a separate football podcast, and they call him Gigantor, and I love it. It's a fun guy to talk about, but he doesn't actually do anything, so hopefully one day. Yeah, anybody else at all? Or
that's
hop
pretty
into
much
the week?
That's what I got.
All right, so we will hop in. So when this airs, we'll be hopping into Thursday Night Football. We got a barn burner. We got the Panthers versus the Texans. It's going to be such an exciting game. You got the Panthers, who won last week against the Saints, 26-7. Again, we kind of talked about their defense already looking really good. I mean, they put a walloping, they beat the Jets, so not great. And then they beat the Saints, who we talked about yardage-wise haven't produced the first couple of weeks.
Yep.
But 26-7, that was a good win against the Saints.
Yep.
You got players like Sam Darnold, who was quarterback 14 last week and actually hasn't looked like the Jets' Sam Darnold. He's looked improved. Christian McCaffrey, who's he was running back 3 last week, and DJ Moore, who I'm not a fan of, but he was wide receiver 11, getting a lot of targets, kind of turning himself into the alpha on that team, I'd say.
Yeah, I don't think, unfortunately, there was too much of a debate there. I mean, Robbie Anderson has had a solid target share, and he's done well with his opportunity, but because of the higher ceiling that Moore has, he's going to maintain that wide receiver 1 spot.
Yeah, and Robbie Anderson, he last year had a pretty decent amount of target share, but correct me if I'm wrong, these first 2 weeks he's had
1 for 3 and 3 for 6.
Yeah, so
he did have a touchdown the first week, but
it was that one deep ball, and that was it. So he's a guy that I think
back to Jets, Robbie Anderson there.
I think he's a guy I'd turn away from and steer more towards DJ Moore, or
wait until you see it again this year.
Even Terrence Marshall possibly. He's somebody you gotta sit and wait on as well, and just see what will happen. But then you got the Texans, who are in all sorts of, they were already coming into the season not looking like they were going to be great. Tyrod played pretty well for him, and now he's down and out. And they actually made it competitive against the Browns last week, 31-21.
Yeah, that's the thing, is they've done really well at getting competitive. You saw kind of the scare in that first week as well. They were hanging in more than anybody was thinking.
Right.
Ultimately, I think that has to do with Taylor. I'm going to be impressed if Davis Mills is able to do the same thing and just come out and make a big statement.
Yeah.
It'd be great for him, but from what I saw in the preseason, not entirely a big ball mover. I mean, he struggled a little bit. He was some low yardage, but he'd make plays. So in this game, again, if you are just ridiculously desperate, you could be looking at any of those Texans tight ends. I believe Farrell Brown is probably the one that I would be looking at there.
Yeah. And then we hop into the running back room. Mark Ingram has kind of solidified himself as that top guy, but somebody to keep an eye on just because he somehow finds the end zone these first 2 weeks. Phillip Lindsay has 2 touchdowns, one each of the past 2 weeks. But other than that, really no production out of him.
Yeah, of them, I would still have to go forward with taking Ingram, just purely because of that opportunity. Again, that snap share is there. 40 attempts in rushing already compared to Lindsay's 13. Yeah, I get he's the pass back, and they might be down, but Ingram has also been getting involved with just a couple of them there. Ultimately, only, Lindsay has 2 targets and Ingram has 3, so it's not like it's being a huge discrepancy there. If you have to start a running back for them, it's going to be Ingram. But you're really going to be grinding teeth while you're doing that. Just
from not even a fantasy football standpoint, but just for this game, do you see the backs being more involved with this backup quarterback situation?
It could be, but that's where I would. I mean, a super, super dark horse here because he hasn't done anything yet. But David Johnson could be coming in with a little bit more of the pass work, or if that is Philip Lindsay, whatever that role may be. And I mean, for what it's worth, Pharaoh Brown, as I was mentioning, he was 4 for 6 with 67 yards overall, pretty much entirely all from that first week, too. He didn't do anything last week. So I kind of rescind my, go start a Texans time end, because I want to explain that's a little bit more of, if you had to pick one, like if you're getting into a little bit more of a Thursday night DFS, that's who you would want to be looking at. I don't mean in terms of your true, I'm going to go pick him up off the waivers and play him this week. Chances are you have a better option with me starting at tight end. But, it's really tough going forward too, because you also have Nico Collins, who's one of their young upcomers. He was just drafted this year. He's also added to the IR, so he's out for 3 weeks. There is just so much up in the air. I don't think I could really start too much with confidence. Maybe Brandon Cooks. Maybe Mark Ingram if you were that desperate, but that's about it.
I think at most, Brandon Cooks is sitting at wide receiver 29 on the year. Still has a good amount of targets just because there's not really a large volume of different people there. And I'm a firm believer in volume and opportunity creates at some point production.
When you have triple the targets of anybody else on the team, you got opportunity.
So for the opportunity standpoint, he's somebody you could flex. But if you can go look on the waiver wire and choose anybody else, there's quite a few wide receivers still on the waiver wire that I would put in over Brandon Cooks.
I would plan on starting Elijah Mitchell over like Mark Ingram this week, just in comparison to for how I'm feeling in that running back room.
Yeah. And then I think the Panthers will take this pretty easy, but maybe the Texans continue to be competitive for no reason at all.
They could. I would still anticipate a low-scoring game. The Panthers have done really well with their defense thus far. Obviously, we saw that as the Saints game last week, but even against the Jets previously, they handled them pretty well. I wouldn't anticipate much more than maybe 25 points in this game.
Yeah, total. Yeah. So then hopping into Sunday morning, we've got the Chargers and the Chiefs. The Chargers, it's just been a big letdown, honestly. A lot of offense, but just unable to score. They had 2 touchdowns called back last week, one of which that really hurt me in a league because I have the stack of Herbert and Jared Cook. It was a Jared Cook and Justin Herbert touchdown that got called back. And then, Herbert's getting another touchdown called back. So he potentially had 3 last week, and that was a very whistle-happy game as well.
Yeah.
There was a lot of referee involvement in that game, and I didn't like it. So, you got Justin Herbert. At some point, you got to figure that he's going to at least put up feasible fantasy numbers at quarterback.
Yeah, I would rely on it. They're not really rushing at all. It's not like they're relying on Eckler or Larry Roundtree to go out there and just pound the rock and waste the clock and play the slow ball. They're out there and they're throwing. And Eckler's involved in that, and as you would expect. But like I said, they're not going out there and trying to attack in terms of the pounding the run game type of team. So again, in this matchup with the Chiefs, what we just saw the Chiefs struggle last week was some downfield balls. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if this is another close game. However, the biggest thing with that is that you have to be able, on the defensive side, be able to stop the Chiefs in terms of just true winning and losing between the Chiefs and the Chargers there. Chargers have put up 20 points in both games.
Right.
Chiefs have put up 33 and 36.
Which is where I'm getting at with the amount of offense, because at least in the passing game, they've had 600 yards of passing offense. Mm-hmm. And you said, 30 points total?
36 and 33 for the Chiefs the last 2, and 20 points in both games, win and a loss.
So, eventually that'll catch up. And hopefully this week they're going to need it to catch up to stay in this game with the Chiefs.
Yep.
Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Mike Williams has actually outscored Allen the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, oddly enough, it was a really weird week for Keenan Allen. He only had 4 receptions, but he still managed to get over 100 yards. So it just kind of an odd way of seeing that. It
seems like those two have flipped roles. Last year it was Keenan Allen with all of the targets and Mike Williams with the low targets but high yardage, and this year it's kind of flipped and Mike Williams has been that target guy.
Yeah, I mean 8 to 10 with Keenan versus Williams there respectively for targets. Not necessarily what you would expect, and obviously take what you want of coach talk in the offseason, but there was actually reports a while ago back in June that Mike Williams was going to be the X receiver. Similar to, because you're thinking about a Lombardi offense here with him coming from the Saints. It was comparing him to the Michael Thomas role. Right. We're almost kind of seeing that here, and I know the whole joke of, it's all slants. Look it up. Julio has had more slants in his career. But just saying that...
Triggered.
Well, I just have to put that out there, just my own defense. He actually had more yardage in his career. Michael Thomas, that is, has had more yardage not off of slants than he has off slants. Not because it's yardage, but also receptions and touchdowns. Yeah, I've done my search. But going back into how that relates, I mean, again, you're changing that role of Mike Williams just coming in originally, even continuing off of that when he was healthy, just as the bomber. He was kind of that, we'll throw it up. But he's developed into a lot more of the guy that he was even in Clemson. He was that guy. He was the guy that he was doing the posts across the middle, not doing the fades, the outs. Keenan Allen, he's always going to be that short guy, but it's almost seeming to affect him a lot more than you would realistically like. I don't know how much I would want to be affecting Keenan Allen's route tree if I was the Chargers, but that's just me. Outside of him, you're not getting a ton of production from Joshua Palmer or Jalen Guyton, so it's hard to be able to
Palmer
replace
was that
long
second
guy.
touchdown called back as well.
Sure.
So, I mean, not a lot of
I just mean 2 targets
volume.
for each. They're definitely not, the volume is the right word. They're definitely not getting involved as much as they should have or could have. And there's only so much you can do about that. But in terms of where they are having to put them and make them those deep guys, those long guys, having both Williams and Allen across, I think that's really also affecting their scoring. That's why they're playing so short and they're playing much less offensively productive than compared to previous years.
Yeah. So pretty much everybody on the Chargers offense, I think, you still start this week.
Absolutely.
Especially looking at the Chiefs defense, who has allowed the Browns and the Ravens all to go in and score a lot of points, and then, the Chiefs only outscoring one of them.
Yeah. Both sides, you're full swing here on your regular starters.
Yeah. Bounce back week, I think, from Tyreek Hill. Just depends on who they put on him. The Chargers do have Derwin James and Chris Harris Jr., I believe, both of which I like in the passing game, and I believe those two will shadow Kelsey and Hill around.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I know Chris Harris is a little bit more of a slot guy, so that could get kind of interesting. Just being on the inside, trying to block in both of them, but ultimately the contain is just going to be too much, especially if you're able to go and play that those are your 2 guys that you're going to bring out. Yeah. If you're moving Derwin James, you're going to get burned deep every single time because Mahomes will do it to you.
Yeah, and the Chargers just need that defensive line to really get after that Chiefs offensive line and try to get back to Mahomes. But I guess we'll just see. Edwards-Helaire, he's kind of a question mark, I believe. Is he somebody you just keep sticking with?
Yeah, I think you have to, because chances are you took him second or third round. Yeah. I didn't believe in his price value this year, so I didn't take him in any leagues. He was coming in with that potential to be, hey, ridiculous, great. But coming in with an injury was already kind of scaring me off, just as it was. So I went to avoid him. And 13 for 46 and 14 for 43 in his 2 games here, going from the second game back to the first game. Yeah. And then 0 receptions actually in this game against the Ravens too. That's a little concerning to me. So where you took him, I think you have to. Right. It's a little bit of a Saquon Barkley situation where you took him, this is your risk, you got to play him. This is your issue. Ultimately, if you really are that scared, wait for a game, let him score a touchdown or two, let him get some receptions. If you're going to stick with him, great. But if not, trade him.
Right.
Take your value while you can, and do something with it. I'm not going to say you're going to go out and get Derrick Henry with him, but I can say that you can get a pretty serviceable back in a package for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So that's about all I got for those. Chiefs this game?
Yep, Chiefs.
Yeah. I just need to see the Chargers actually score.
Yep.
And before I can bet on them at all. Moving on to the Cardinals and Jaguars. For one of my leagues, this should be fun.
You got them going against each other?
No, I just got Kyler and D-Hop stacked. Yep. Against a Jaguars team that is not great, hasn't looked good at all. But the Cardinals, even last week, playing the Vikings, should have lost that game.
Yeah, well, the thing is their defense is pretty much non-existent in the secondary side as far as the defensive backs. That offensive line is insane. Chandler Jones and J.J. Watt, that's fantastic. They're always going to have pressure.
Right.
That's always going to be a staple. However, when you have three cornerbacks that you can probably look up their names and you don't know who they are, not a good look. Not a good sign. That brings you back to the Colts over the last couple of years, before this last year when they got really good.
So does that make you a little more open to Trevor Lawrence this week?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a position where you have to start him, or if we're in a closer debate, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm gonna go and just wing him out over probably anyone in the top 10 by or 15 by any means.
So say a guy like Jameis Winston.
I'd roll Lawrence.
Yeah, I would as well. I think this game could turn into a shootout. I really hope it does, for my own selfish reasons.
It could be closer, but I don't think Jacksonville's defense can hold up enough with the production and talent of Hopkins, or honestly even the run game. This could be a game where the runs really get going for the Cardinals late.
I've got a lot of stock in the Cardinals. I even have Chase Edmonds in a separate league, so I'd love for this offense to do even more than what they've been doing, and they've got a great chance against the Jags. For the Jaguars, anybody that you would comfortably start this week?
Marvin Jones.
Yeah, he's
Marvin Jones easily. He's really stepped up into a favorite of Trevor Lawrence, which is kind of rumored. You kind of saw that a little bit in the preseason too, despite the injury. But he has really come along well. Already putting up 20 targets. Chark is actually not far behind. He's at 16 targets. He's been super quiet while doing it. He picked up a touchdown, but just 4 receptions out of his 16 is where the discrepancy gets there.
Yeah.
Laviska, again, I think that's getting a little bit desperate. I've been having to flex him for the last 2 weeks. In the league that I took him, I thought he was worth the value.
Right.
Maybe look at someone else at flex here if you have
especially
him
he's
versus
questionable this week as well.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I think he's going to be fine, but coming off of injury, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
It does sound like he's probably going to be fine. Last I had looked. But outside of that, even just going forward and with your expected role of him being a breakout guy this year, he still could be. It's a rookie quarterback. You're going to be developing a lot with him. But maybe if you get that chance, since if you're flexing him before, you're probably not in your main receivers quite yet. I would be looking at a guy like Sterling Shepard to start over him for the time being. If you can get a couple weeks to let him come back, really develop a role. He's still putting up 17 targets. He's caught 9 of them. It's just 47 yards. He's got to develop his role. He was a bigger play guy last year. They'll figure it out. Don't panic on Laviska.
Well, and for this week as well, Rondale Moore is somebody who was on the waiver wire in a lot of places. He's somebody that I think I would flex over Laviska this week for sure.
And you don't know who's going to be the starter number 2 guy outside of Hopkins in the Cardinals offense. I mean, 1 week it's going to be Christian Kirk. 1 week it's going to be Rondale Moore. 1 week it's going to be whoever wants to come out and play 2 and play receiver for the Cardinals. Yeah. So I think there's going to be a lot of those games where it's going to be hard to tell.
Yeah.
that's where you really have to keep in mind. I wouldn't just sit there and wing out Rondale Moore or Christian Kirk this week.
Right.
Maybe, Rondale Moore because the recency.
Right.
See what happens with it. Obviously, he's a rookie. But I would not try to dart throw this offense in terms of those 2 receivers or 3 receivers with AJ Green also in the mix. Every single one of them is going to have their game this year. At least
AJ
one,
Green
and
even
it's going
last
to be a
week
good mix.
He was getting quite a few targets and.
Yeah, he did well, and that's like I said, the thing is, especially if they're going to get into games like this, where it could get ugly early,
right.
or it could be a little bit closer. But also, just the Cardinals play in a super tough division. They're going to be in a lot of close games against some tough defenses. There's going to be just so many different targets to go around outside of Hopkins that I personally could not get myself to make that dart throw if I had the option. You know, again, if you're in your flex between two people there, that's where you're really going to start to look at those factors and give an edge to someone else because of that.
Right.
But if you're the super underdog that week going in,
might as well
play the high upside and take your dart throw.
So Cardinals, I believe that game should be fun to watch. I think, honestly.
Yeah. Well, if anything, they're a fun team to watch as it is.
Yeah.
So it should be an entertaining game for sure.
Then we move on to the Browns and the Bears. The Bears actually won last week against the Bengals. It was an all right game.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't anything to get super excited about. Justin Fields looking like he is scheduled to make his first start.
Yep.
So hopefully a little more production this week. Like I said last week, a lot of drops, a lot of offensive miscues that weren't necessarily on him. But he still did look like a rookie. He was making some not good decisions. But hopefully this week it'll turn around. But he is playing the Browns, and that defense is not necessarily nice for anybody.
It spells a lot of trouble for Allen Robinson owners. I mean, it could be a really good game or it could be a really bad game. And unfortunately for you kind of invested on him as being a pretty safe floor. Unfortunately, you're not getting that right now. He had a great game early on, but now he was 2 for 24. He had the touchdown, don't get me wrong,
right.
But 2 for 24 and just 4 targets this last week against the Bengals, and a team that he probably should have done a lot better against compared to playing the Rams the week before when it was a lot tougher. So there's different ways to go about that. There's a way of saying, yeah, the Browns could be tougher. He's going to be more like the first game than the last game. But also you have Fields here. His 27.7 quarterback rating last week was not convincing to me. They're going to end up leaning on the run game here to try and do whatever they can against the Bengals or the Browns defensive line and linebacking core as compared to going against was it Jabril Peppers and Denzel Ward.
Yeah.
One's a little more scarier than the other in that case. Darnell Mooney, I wouldn't expect the biggest week. If he goes and gets a touchdown, great
there's
deep.
a possibility he could outdo Allen Robinson this week.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, just the fact that he did last week, 6 for 66 with 8 targets.
Yeah.
It could be the same. That's kind of an odd week if you're a Mooney owner because you took him as the big play guy.
Right.
And that's all he was last year. It's great if he can develop his route tree, but when you have Allen Robinson in his defined role and as good as he is, as truly underrated as he is, it's unfortunate that he's never had a good quarterback. It worries me playing him. You're gonna play him because you took him early and he's gonna be worth your time. He has to be another one of those guys you play.
Well,
but he worries me.
Asking for a friend. Allen Robinson or Deontay Johnson if he's healthy.
Who do the Steelers have?
Steelers play Cincinnati.
Deontay Johnson.
Jacoby Myers against the Saints.
Deontay Johnson.
No, for Robinson.
Oh, for Robinson or Myers. Robinson.
Zach Pascal against the Titans.
Robinson. With Eason starting, Robinson.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, Robinson, fantasy-wise, hasn't really produced all that much these first couple weeks. This week, scares me more just because of the lack of production and now going against an actually really good defense.
Well, that's the sad thing is 6 for 11 in week 1.
Yeah.
A little bit more his forte. 35 yards.
Yeah.
That's tough.
And I just see it being a lot more of that this week against the Browns.
You deserve better.
Who are doing well this season. Again, they were close against the Texans, but their wide receiver room is a little odd. They've got Landry on IR, but Odell is looking to make his first appearance this season.
I think he's getting close. It's kind of getting to almost a little bit more of a game time decision. Yeah. He might, just with his injury history, be out yet again. I wouldn't be surprised. It's going to be an ugly offensive game where you see a lot of quote-unquote no-names as compared to the star value that they usually have there. A lot to watch there.
So I think the only place I would go fantasy-wise is Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Chubb is the running back 4 on the season, averaging almost 20 points a game. Hunt's sitting at 28 with 11.7 a game, but again, if you're thin in the running back area, Kareem Hunt is better than most of those guys and has a higher upside anyway. And in a game like this where offensively they're not going to have all of their weapons wide receiver-wise, I think Hunt probably sees a few more targets at least and could bump that 11.7 up.
I wouldn't be surprised there at all.
Yeah, so I think here's my hot take for the week. I think Kareem Hunt possibly could outscore Nick Chubb this week.
Depending on the touchdowns, but in terms of true production outside of the touchdowns, it certainly could happen. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. 26-19 in their attempts in rushing with Chubb over Hunt. In terms of receptions, it is 4 for Hunt and 3 for Chubb, so neither getting overly involved there.
Yeah, I think the Browns though will take this one. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how Fields and the Bears do.
So kind of a bigger spread on this one too, with +7.
And I could see it too. I mean, from what we saw from Justin Fields last week, if the offense runs anywhere near like that, could be a decent spread between the two teams. So who do you got there?
I'd take Cleveland as well.
Yeah.
Also take the spread. 45.5 is the over-under right now.
Yeah, I don't see it being super high scoring for sure.
Largely over. I mean, I think with the talent they have, if they're trying to run out the game, either one of those guys in Hunt or Chubb can score, put up 3 touchdowns real quick, and
Coast.
They can run it out. Yep.
Yeah. Then we move on to the football team versus the Bills.
This would be a good game.
So here's the deal. Last week, I've been trying to trade for Antonio Gibson since the season even began.
Ooh, that's not going to happen with the hype he's got.
I finally made a trade for him last week.
Okay. Did you end up overpaying?
I gave away Keenan Allen.
I don't mind that.
Yeah. And somebody else. It was a backup running back of some sort. I can't remember the exact details.
I'd be well okay with that.
And going in against the Giants, I figured backup quarterback, this is going to be Antonio Gibson's season. This is going to be great. And then they throw the ball 50 times. 46 to be exact. And they brought back J.D. McKissick in the role that he had last year, where week 1 you didn't see that. It was Antonio Gibson is our guy. He's going to get the ball. McKissick, sit on the bench.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit more safety net at that point because it was a backup quarterback. I think that's why, because Taylor Heineke has had a lot of the experience with him, and it was a comfortability in going forward. I wouldn't expect a ton of him taking those targets away. He picked up 6, pretty much all of them in the last drive or two there late.
What really worries me, though, is the football team, they played the whole game like they were down by 3 touchdowns. That was how the play calling was going.
Yeah.
And when the game was on the line, their 2-minute offense or whatever. J.D. McKissic was the guy in.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm not saying that's not a point of concern because I'm a Gibson owner as well.
Yeah.
But I'm not necessarily worried either because for what it's worth, he hasn't had a blowing up ridiculous stat line in the last 2 games, but he has looked really, really good, and you can see the improvement in him just in the physical way that he's playing and the capabilities that he's putting forward with his hands. Opportunity's going to be there, and it's going to land in his hands quite literally. Off of 13 carries, he had 69 yards, but he just the plays that he's making, the cuts that he's making, the tackles he's breaking, it's the physical, intangible part of the game that he is really looking good on, and that's what doesn't make me worry at all. He's going to earn his reps. He'll be fine.
And I appreciate all of the production that he's actually putting out with the opportunities he's getting. I mean, running for 5 yards a pop, you would expect that to translate into, okay, we're going to continue to give you the ball. I was calling for Ron Rivera's head last week, especially after they've got like 2 minutes left.
Yep.
Deep on their side of the field. All they got to do is run the football, and Gibson has been running well. I think a play or two before they threw that interception, he had a 10-yard run. Yep. All you had to do was give the man the ball, run out the clock, you win the game. They throw the ball, and then they throw an interception.
You're definitely not the only one surprised there. I was, and many, many, many analysts were wondering as well, to the point where Gibson was actually trending, just saying like more or less what is happening.
Yeah,
because he's earned that. I mean, it made all that sense. Ultimately, it worked for them, so Rivera can say, "I don't care, eat it."
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of in terms of the true fantasy production of I don't care about your fantasy coaching style. They did what needed to be done. They went with all reliable with the backup quarterback. I'm not overly surprised. I'm not really worried either.
Yeah.
Given that those, McKissic only had 4 carries too in the game. One of them, again, he fell in for the touchdown. Whatever. I wouldn't anticipate that to happen often. If he does, maybe start to worry. But if he was going to be a little bit more even with that carry total, then it would be a point of concern.
And then just moving on to their defense quickly, how much concern is there about that? Because they came in as, okay, this defense is going to be really good. They were good last year. They're only going to get better. And then they let the Giants just go in and do whatever they felt like. They couldn't really cover anybody.
Yeah.
Daniel Jones could scramble wherever he wanted to go. Saquon had a nice big run. It was kind of nice to see him start to get back in that kind of stride. And they just let them do it looks like.
I would say long term, I'm not worried. This week against the Bills, not your strong play.
Right.
I mean, when we've got the Bills and then you play the Falcons and then the Saints. Okay, yeah, there's a difference there. But then you play the Chiefs and the Packers.
Yeah.
That's hard. Then they go play the Broncos. That's a little bit easier. Then they play the Bucs. So they're going to be up and down all year. I wouldn't be.
Broncos is going to be a tough matchup for them. Let's just be honest. This offense.
It could be a good game with the way they're looking right now. But I mean, just going from that, then they play the Panthers, then the Seahawks. There's such as up and down throughout the year until they get to their final run. Raiders, who knows what they're looking like by then. Cowboys, Eagles, Giants. What a schedule there.
Right.
Your playoff schedule is looking a lot better at that point. So long term, I think they've got a lot of value and they'll still be fine. A lot of time to figure things out. They still looked good against the Chargers, even though they lost. They only allowed 20 points to a team that could have put up a lot more.
Right.
Not necessarily worried long term, but I wouldn't put them high on my list against the Bills this week. I think the Bills are going to have a solid momentum step this week.
And speaking of, we got Josh Allen, Devin Singletary, and Stephon Diggs, who I think are the only people that I would confidently put into a roster. Singletary's kind of been a surprise. He had 91 yards and a touchdown last week.
Yeah, he had one good run early on that really kind of paved the path in that. But he did nonetheless look better than his counterpart in Zach Moss, I would say.
And he's looking significantly better from last year, where it looks like they can rely on giving him the ball actually this year instead of having to throw it every single play.
Yep.
But I see it kind of affecting Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Allen tore everything up last year. So far, he's only averaging 16.9. hasn't had, the games he was having last year. It was only 2 games. Don't want to overreact, but hopefully that's something they can turn around.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about a trade target, I mean, if you can get someone scared right now and you can offer up Matthew Stafford,
who's hot.
Yeah, he is. I mean, and I think he's going to have a really good year, don't get me wrong, but if you can acquire Josh Allen with Matthew Stafford and a small bench piece, I'd take that 10 days out of the week.
Yeah. Definitely a
3 extra days
buy
to make
while
that
it's
trade.
low,
Yes.
And then Stephon Diggs, honestly, isn't looking terrible. We just see a lot more of the ball being spread around from Stephon Diggs. Last year, he was the go-to target, had a lot of catches, and most targeted receiver in the league.
Yeah.
Now you're seeing Emmanuel Sanders, Dawson Knox,
Cole Beasley,
Gabriel Davis. You're seeing a lot of those guys starting to get targets, which cuts into him a little bit, but he's still averaging 16 a week, which...
Yeah, well, and Diggs is still putting up solid points, 9 for 13 in this first week for 69 yards, 4 for 8 with a touchdown this week, just to reassure you a little bit if you did take him super early in that probably second round range. I think he's going to be fine. Again, the Bills are going to be good. They don't have the toughest division anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I would expect Allen to really sit back into what he has been previously, and really sink into what he should be this year based on his potential. Especially if the run game is going to actually start to work and develop there. Great, that's all the better, because it takes a lot off of him. They're not going to rush 3 every single time.
Well, and looking at what Daniel Jones, who's definitely not Josh Allen, did last week,
Mm-hmm.
Josh Allen plays that same way, but is a much better player. I think this week it's gonna.
And Daniel Jones had his way in running too.
Right.
So
yeah. That's
talk about that factor of Josh Allen.
So I think that the Bills definitely bounced back in a really big way. I know that they won 35-0 against Miami, but that was without Tua, and I'm not so confident in the Dolphins. But they looked really good last week. I think this week is more of a the offense looked really good this week.
Mm-hmm.
Allen got back on track. Stephon Diggs scored another touchdown. Devin Singletary has a 100-yard game, something like that.
46-yard touchdown.
Yeah. So
I will say that if he's not, Cole Beasley needs to be rostered in your league if you're a PPR.
100%. Even Emmanuel Sanders, I think, is a guy to keep stashed on your bench. He's got a decent amount of targets. The first week he looked really good. Looked like the Emmanuel Sanders,
The prime.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of where
Sanders
that
of old.
was. Because all I can
Steelers?
think of is the Saints. Yeah, the Steelers. So, I think
Classic.
he's somebody that could kind of start transitioning back to that kind of role, especially on a really good offense that should get back on track throughout these next few weeks. So sorry, football team. I love you guys. I really want Gibson to do great. I know you would like McLaurin to continue to get 14 targets a week.
Yep.
But I think the Bills take it this week.
Yeah, I'm taking the Bills as well. There's just one team trending up, one trending down. Even though they're coming off of the win, just having the backup quarterback in there. Not to say that Heineke did bad either. He figured out a lot. I think he's going to continue to develop. He's not the most high upside guy in the world. But this offense is just too good, and the Bills have a pretty solid defense still for what it's worth going forward. I would easily take them here.
And I think Washington needs to switch their game plan from last week, because if they're trying to throw a Tre'Davious White 25 times, say,
yep.
That's not going to work out for them. It's
going
to look bad.
Yeah, it'll be a little interesting to see how they go and attack that, considering the slight lack thereof of other options besides McLaurin in the passing game.
Right. The only other one really would be Logan Thomas.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bills, I think, got this one. Hopefully we see more. I'm hoping it's closer just so we see more Gibson.
Yeah.
But I don't see that happening.
7.5 spread right now.
Yeah, I would definitely take the spread. Then you got the Colts and the Titans. Colts again are another team trending down. Wentz probably, not playing this week. So you got Jacob Eason.
I'm going to look on that, because last I saw, he wasn't ruled out by any means. And, I mean, yeah, it sucks to have 2 sprained ankles, but...
how do you sprain both of your ankles?
Did you see the hit?
I did.
It's kind of gross. I mean, he just got flung around, and he came on one and then rolled on the other.
If there was a guy to do something crazy like that, it would be Carson.
I'll be honest, it was a little cartoony. Like, he just, kind of rolled. You kind of feel for the guy in terms of injuries like that, because there's nothing he could do about it, but also he's always injured, so...
Yeah, I don't feel that bad.
Take what you want there, but... last I saw, he wasn't necessarily trending down either in terms of being ruled out.
I mean, if I was to put money on it, I'd say they were going to start Eason.
I mean, long-term wise, they wouldn't necessarily be a bad move, but at the same time, if it's fairly easy to just throw on 2 braces, we'll see.
Well, and we have to keep in mind that the Colts and he came from the Eagles. The Eagles are depending on Carson Wentz to actually play more than half of the season, because some of their draft picks are contingent on him playing. Yep. So the Eagles are probably rooting for him to be like, just take those ankles up, get in the game,
Yep.
But other than that, Zach Pascal, had 3 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. Michael Pittman Jr. had 20 points last week.
Yep.
Looked pretty good. But I don't know how confident I'd be in anybody on that offense. You talked about Jonathan Taylor, but 12-point average over the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's simply just opportunity. I don't necessarily know if he's going to be running a lot, but if he's involved in the pass game, you saw him with, I believe, 8 targets in the first game, and I can confirm on that. It was either 6 or 8, because him and Himes were both within 1 of each other. And if you can get back to it with both of them, you're going to be trending a little bit more, especially in terms of Hines, closer to his Week 1 production than Week 2 production. Emergency flex play. I wouldn't feel great about it, but if you needed to, do what you got to do. 7 for 8 is what Taylor was in that first one. Again, if he's the dump-off guy, great. Yeah. I wouldn't expect a ton of actual true rushing value in this, but we'll see what happens.
And then on the other side, the Titans actually offensively, mostly Derrick Henry, but you also had Julio break out a little bit last week. He had 6 catches, 128 yards. A.J. Brown had 4 drops, I believe it was.
Yep.
It's not something to be overly concerned about. He's not going to... He's a great wide receiver. He's not going to go out and have 4 drops every week.
Yeah, he hasn't had drop issues in the past or even dating back to college as far as I know. So he should be fine in that sense as well. Still put up 9 targets.
Yeah. And Derrick Henry, do we expect another multi-touchdown game against a Colts defense that's not necessarily that bad?
It's always a threat for him. Colts defense is actually fairly underrated, I would say.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect 182 yards and 3 touchdowns, but like I said, I would never be surprised from Derrick Henry in that he could pop off 250 yards and I wouldn't be surprised. But that's the thing, is that with his type of player and his type of value and his type of usage, he could go out and put 25 for 89 and 2 touchdowns and I'd still be just as thrilled.
Right.
So you're always going to be playing Henry. Not that there was a doubt in that, but I wouldn't be worried. And
then, just for shits and giggles, Julio Jones or A.J. Brown, which one is going to be the Cooper Kupp this week?
I think Brown is the higher upside there in terms of the Cooper Kupp because you're getting involved in touchdowns there.
Yeah.
In terms
of
the
deep bomb, because Kupp had that deep bomb last week.
I'd still take Brown.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I like A.J. Brown better than Julio Jones regardless.
Mm-hmm. Again, I wouldn't be surprised because Julio's still that type of player, and I'm glad for him that he's on a team that I can go for him now.
Right.
But honestly, I'm really happy that he's on a team that he can be used properly and used still explosively. It's not like he's trending down in his career, and it was just such a wind-down move that he's going to retire here probably by the end of the year, like some people honestly kind of try to think after his run with the Falcons and being injured the last couple of years. If he can stay healthy, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see games like this, 6 for 28.
Well, and it's nice to see, especially after week 1, where you're like, okay, you're Julio Jones. What the hell happened?
Yep.
And this week he goes out and looks like Julio Jones, and I think it'll stay about the same. The Colts, I couldn't necessarily tell you who's in their secondary.
They got Rocky Sin at quarterback, and I know they have another one. I'll get back to you if you want to move on.
Yeah, but I think it could be a close game. I don't know how the quarterback situation is going to go if Eason is in.
There's no update on Wentz right now. It just said if Eason is needed, he'll be ready. Right. Is what the coach said, which is the most coach talk thing that you could find.
But either way, I think the Titans.
Oh, Zaire Franklin is the other one that they've got, and they've also got Julian Blackman, who's really good. Xavier Rhodes, who's been he's questionable, but he's been doing really well. Darius Leonard, obviously, super involved with both sides of the rushing game and the pass game. They're big on the interceptions. DeForest Buckner, always a threat. Yeah. Colts defense is better than most will give it credit for.
Right, for sure. Then we move on to the Saints and Patriots. I foresee this being another kind of low-scoring affair, unless Jameis can throw 5 more touchdowns for only 150 yards.
Yeah.
But the Patriots' defense is also a defense that I think has been underrated for a long time. I think they've always had a really good defense regardless of who's in. But the Saints, they lost 26-7 against the Panthers, had 128 total yards. That was it, and had 2 turnovers. Were both from Jameis? Was it 2 interceptions or just 1 interception?
I think it might have been 2.
Yeah.
It was 2.
Yeah, they didn't look fantastic, and again, Kamara, 30 total yards, didn't look great. But then, if you look at their receivers, you don't know who's going to be the guy. You have, I love that I never knew this guy's name was Lil Jordan.
Oh yeah, he's a big guy.
Lil Jordan Humphrey.
That's the irony of it, is Lil Jordan Humphrey is actually really good. I believe he's out of Texas.
Yeah.
They had him undrafted, I want to say. He's made some splash plays before too.
Yeah, and then you got Marquez Callaway, Chris Hogan, Deontay Harris, Juwan Johnson. Fantasy-wise, I don't think you go for any of them just because you don't know who's going to be that guy. And if the offense only has 128 yards, there's not a lot to spread around to everybody.
Yeah, 6'4", 225.
Yeah, that's a big boy.
And out of Texas.
Kamara, you're still going to start him.
Absolutely.
But Jameis against a Patriots defense, I believe they don't have Stephon Gilmore, correct?
Nope, not yet.
So it's not impossible for them to throw the football and do well. Just, I don't know if I want to bet on Jameis.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I would expect in terms of coaching and play calling, Sean Payton's the type of guy that he's going to come out and he's going to get really creative this week. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw a little bit more Taysom Hill this week. Not to say that he's going to take reps from him, but they're going to start getting him involved with some of those trick plays with getting in at tight end, or if they're going to have him back at tailback and toss it to him and he's going to throw. Right. You're going to see Peyton get pretty creative this week, especially against a Patriots team with Bill Belichick, who's known for doing the same thing.
Right.
Honestly, I don't want to overreact from last week is the biggest thing. I think people not considering the fact that Marshawn Lattimore was out last week and C.J. Gardner-Johnson were out last week. Technically, they were kind of in the game plan all week, too, because they were just late scratches on Sunday morning. Eric McCoy is still making his way back at center, too. So there's pieces to this that they're still getting back defensively as far as the Saints go. Not that the 26 points that they allowed last week was a ton either.
Right.
But I would expect it to be kind of a little bit closer to that first week, which was appalling, don't get me wrong, against the Packers. I think they can if they can manage around that 20 points area, maybe 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals against the Patriots, that would be successful. You like to think that if you can get in a game plan, getting a little more creative, just having the opportunity to get Kamara involved, whether that's the run game early on or whether that's going to be just passing to him or getting Callaway involved or however that may be. I think this could certainly be a close game, and so does the spread, only a 3-point spread here.
And then, I mean, don't need to necessarily panic about the offense, I guess. The Panthers, again, are a defense that I don't think a lot of people realize how good they actually are.
Bradbury's no joke. He did really well last year. Bradbury did well 2 years ago, and then he went in to develop with the Giants now.
Yeah.
But they've that's a sense of saying that they've done really well in training with young guys.
Yeah. And then for the Patriots, they were outgained on offense last week by the Jets, still won 25-6, but their defense forced 4 turnovers. And Mac Jones, in his 2 games, he's being very efficient. 74% completion percentage, no interceptions, just not a lot of yards, not a lot of touchdowns.
No touchdowns.
But, yeah. So, I mean, he's being efficient, not turning the ball over at least, giving this team a chance to win. But really, the bright spot of their team is James White and Damian Harris. White had a big week last week. Harris is actually looking like that running back that is going to take a bulk of the carries, 42 touches in the last 2 weeks. And then you have Jacoby Myers, who's got 15 targets in the last 2 weeks. I still think this is an offense that's trying to find their identity and gel as a full unit.
No, yeah, absolutely. Especially when you have you're walking in, you don't know who the number 1 receiver is because you've got Jacoby Myers and Nelson Aguilar. Either one could vie for that. You don't know who your tight end 1 is. You've got Hunter Henry and Johnny Smith. Both of them are still kind of vying for that. You may not even get an answer from that at some point this season, but I just think there's a lot to figure out going forward. And even ultimately with Damian Harris, you didn't know if he was going to truly be the guy or not, fantasy-wise. But obviously running away with that, people thought Ramondre Stevenson was going to be taking away things early down from him, and he has had exactly 1 attempt for 2 yards this year. So
he's a guy I took a late round flyer on, and
it was worth it.
Dropped him pretty quickly after seeing Harris's production. But honestly, I think those 2 running backs are, a running back 2 or flex option.
Harris had put in flex. If you have to. I think that the Saints' run defense of anything is something that they've really made a staple the last couple years rather.
Yeah.
But even you saw that with Aaron Jones, he was stifled early on before they were able to get away early. Even McCaffrey, he was a lot more hurtful in the pass game, which is fairly traditional with him. I think that the run game could be a lot more effective here with James White. I guess not even in terms of the run game. I should say the more effective running back between the 2 would be James White because of that pass game.
Right. And seeing McCaffrey catch 9 passes.
Yep.
I think White is a guy that's going to have another good week. But I wouldn't start Mac Jones. I think I'd stay away from the receivers.
I wouldn't roster Mac Jones, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's true.
In traditionally.
And I think I'd just stay away from the receivers and the tight ends until maybe one of them shows.
I'd start Myers.
I know that he was in the questions of him or Allen Robinson. But
if Gardner Johnson is out again, and especially if Lattimore's out again, I'd start Myers.
Yeah. Maybe we see Mac Jones throw his first touchdown this week.
He has 1.
Oh, okay.
No, for first week. He just had none against the Jets.
Gotcha. Well, yeah. Maybe we see some more touchdowns.
Aguilar caught his first touchdown first week.
Aguilar, man, bright flash in week 1.
Mm-hmm. And it'll be a lot of that. That's.
I think his will be more sporadic, kind of like some of the stuff he did with the Raiders. He didn't necessarily have consistent great games, but had a few flashes here and there. In regards of picking this game, I think I like the Patriots defense just a little more, but that is contingent on the Saints being healthy or not.
Yeah. I guess I'll try and get a report on that. I don't know if Lattimore is trending in the right way. I mean, it was a knee issue.
Right.
That kind of popped up in the end of the first week that had gotten him. It's fairly up in the air, it sounds like, on him yet.
I think I'll just go low confidence and say the Saints' defensive line is really good. Alvin Kamara is probably the most talented player on the field, so I'd go Saints.
Yeah, so the fact that that Lattimore was practicing before the week's ends, but like ultimately was just unavailable, means he was close to me. I think Lattimore at the very least would be back. I'm gonna roll Saints here as well, just because I'm wearing the jersey and I feel like I need to support. But I feel like there's a point where in the upside of this, Mac Jones doesn't match the upside of Winston. James White doesn't match the upside of Kamara. You could have 3 James Whites and it wouldn't match the upside of Kamara.
Right.
The pass game is actually, in terms of receivers and tight ends are fairly similar. Tight ends win that just because it's fairly non-existent right now outside of Juwan Johnson's couple of touchdowns. There was nothing for Troutman last week in terms of even targets to show for it compared to week 1. If they can reestablish that and get open over the middle, great. Help out Winston a lot. Not necessarily going to build the yardage.
Yeah.
But just establishing some sort of offense there is going to be the biggest thing. Try and get Callaway going. I'm not sure how close Traquan Smith is. He might still be out nonetheless. I think there's just enough pieces there to take the upside, even on the defensive side.
Right.
Patriots didn't look bad, but they've also not played 2 great teams either. The creative mind of Sean Payton versus Bill Belichick will be a sight to see here. Yeah, but not necessarily like it would have been 3 years ago.
Right. Then we got the Falcons and Giants. I think this is going to be a good week for the Falcons. Just from what I saw last week with Washington and how they passed the ball against the Giants. Mm-hmm. They did it effectively. Matt Ryan, he's kind of a question mark. Somebody that more than likely was drafted. Yeah. Don't know if you'd be starting him by this point. But I think Calvin Ridley, especially because of what McLaurin did last week, Ridley's going to be a really good play this week. I think he finally lives up to the draft capital he went at. And then we kind of talked about Mike Davis and Cordero Patterson. I think it's just a toss-up between the two. Yeah,
your flex value in Mike Davis as it is anyway. If you don't have him and you have Patterson, you can fill that in too. Yeah. Would you rather start Jacoby Myers versus Cordero Patterson or even Mike Davis?
I think I'd go Davis. Mm-hmm. Just to, again, more opportunities in my eyes.
I'd agree. Myers
better
over
chance.
Patterson.
Yeah.
I'd go Myers over Patterson.
Yeah. And then Kyle Pitts, he's been fairly quiet.
He took over big this last week over Hayden Hurst, who was a little bit more of a split in that first week. He really took over the snap share there.
Right.
5 for 6 with 73. Yeah, in terms of the Hall of Fame, automatically as soon as he was drafted, caliber guy.
I mean, he's produced the past 2 weeks. He's got 10 catches over the first 2 weeks. Just over 100 yards.
9 receptions off of 14 targets.
Yeah, so
100 yards, so 104.
I think Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts are both guys that this week could have really good games. Even Logan Thomas last week against the Giants had a 14-point game, something like that. So
week 1, Hurst was 60% and Pitts was 68%, which still says they're going to have a lot of 2 tight end sets. But this week it moved to 79 and 42% discrepancy there.
Yeah. And then on the Giants side, Daniel Jones, MVP last week. Then Saquon Barkley and Sterling Shepard. I think out of all of them, I wouldn't even mind starting Daniel Jones this week.
Yeah, you could have worse plays if you're in a streaming all year type of quarterback position. I wouldn't mind it. He's established the run game, and the Falcons aren't known to do anything with that either. But he looked effective against a good defense in the Washington football team. And he's utilized his weapons pretty well, and I wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see Saquon take a step forward here too.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of saw a flash last week of Saquon going for, I think it was a 20 or 30-yard run. Mm-hmm. Just looked like the old Saquon, hit the hole, was fast, quick.
Yeah.
And I think he's making his strides.
I'd buy low
back
on Saquon.
Yeah.
As well, if you can get him low, same as Josh Allen. If you can go and stock up on guys like that for nothing right now, and you're rostering Josh Allen and Saquon Barkley on top of whatever you drafted, you're sitting pretty good.
And then Sterling Shepard, I think he's going to continue, at least this week, being that number one guy. Mm-hmm. Do you see at any point Kenny Golladay or, say, Kadarius Toney or Darius Slayton even...
There'll be games with that. I mean, Slayton's always had his games where he'll just randomly go out and go 8 for 160 and 2 touchdowns because
he almost had a long touchdown this last week. So.
Yeah, I mean, and he did have a touchdown ultimately too, but the one that was off the hands too. It's tough to see games like that if you're playing someone else that's not him, mostly because it's hard to start him any game that is too. He'll go through the next 3 games with dead nothing, and you wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I'm still going to say that half of the reason that Shepard... I won't even say half. I'd say a quarter of the reason that Shepard is doing well is because Golladay is getting some reps in. He's not necessarily doing a lot with it other than taking the football off the face of the helmet or off of his hands. Sure. That only makes Shepard look that much better. But because he is still a factor and he has that potential that he could be good, I think that only helps Shepard that much more as compared to previous years where Shepard will have a good couple games and then slow down. This really, to me, helps keep the foot on the pedal for Shepard going forward.
Well, especially because the Falcons' defense is weak. I'm in a position where, like I said, I have Shepard in 2 leagues, and I'm looking at him or CeeDee Lamb. Him or Deebo Samuel. Both those 2 have kind of tougher weeks. Shepard is on my mind of throwing in there instead of those 2 at my flex. One, because of how he's been doing the last 2 weeks, and because it's against the Falcons.
Who was your first one?
CeeDee Lamb.
I'd play Lamb.
That's where I'm kind of tough there. And then Deebo Samuel. Both of those are 2 tough decisions to make.
I'd probably still play Deebo against the Packers.
Yeah. It's going to come down to just how I'm feeling on that day, but I don't know.
Well, the Packers are a Sunday night game, too, just to really add in some factor and some drama there.
So I guess we'll see.
But nonetheless, on most rosters that aren't that stacked at receiver, I'm probably going to be playing Shepard over a lot of guys.
Yeah.
I actually have a league that I have Kareem Hunt as my flex right now, and I'm really going to be considering playing Shepard over him.
I would play Shepard over Hunt, to be honest. Even though we talked about both running backs being very viable in that matchup for Cleveland, I think Shepard is a dark horse to be a top 20 receiver this year.
Absolutely.
So it'll be interesting to see. I think the Giants probably, this is a game that they can pull out. But then again, the Falcons, I think their offense could also get going this week against I would say a weak Giants defense.
Yeah, but that's the thing is both of these teams could just go and blow out the other one, or both of these teams could go out and do absolutely nothing.
I'd be even interested in just watching a shootout.
Yeah. This I don't know if it'll get there, but this shootout could be a 13-14 game, or this shootout could be a 314-313 game.
Yeah, we'll see. I think the Giants, though, that's who I would bet on. Low confidence there as well.
I'm taking the Giants just simply with the options. If you're going to put run game to run game, I'm taking Saquon, hopefully taking a step forward here. Continuing to develop. He didn't get training camp with his injury. Right. He didn't get any of that. He's really working it out. You can see him continuing to get better every week. Full faith in Saquon as of this moment. versus Mike Davis and Cordell Patterson especially. And then Ridley's great. He's better than anyone on the Giants, but no one outside of that, in terms of true receivers, is a threat other than Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. And then we're moving on to the Bengals and Steelers, another divisional game. This one's going to be tough. The Steelers' offense isn't looking like really anything great. Even when they beat the Bills, they didn't have a lot of offensive production. You got Roethlisberger, who I would never start in a fantasy league. I'd start Trevor Lawrence over him, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's fair.
But then you got guys like Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool, even James Washington. But I feel like all of those receivers are dependent on Ben doing decent.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of faith in Dwayne Haskins if Roethlisberger's not good enough to go.
And, like, Johnson, he did get injured on the last play of last week, but reports I saw was it wasn't anything major. He should be fine coming back this week. And, again, he is that target hog. So I think he's still somebody that would be okay to roll out as long as he is fully healthy.
Tomlin said yesterday his knee injury is looking better, but not to be confused with great.
Right. And he's a guy that always is struggling with injury. I don't know if it's because he's a smaller receiver, or if he's just not.
Yeah, at 5'10", 183, you're not exactly the most stable.
Because he's just always constantly got something going on.
I will say the frustration is certainly there in terms of not because he's always injured, but just why he got injured. He was there at an unnecessary point of the game.
Right.
You got to take care of your players better than that. In a point where there was not a point where you were coming back. Some breaking news as well. Matt Nagy had just announced that Justin Fields will be starting.
Okay. Well,
so as we did plan on talking in our breakdown there, but yeah, it is for sure.
And then, so like Juju, I think maybe even he looked decent last week as well.
He did get all of his early on though. Like he started with 5 receptions pretty much in the first or second drive, and then for the rest of the game he only had one catch.
Right. And I would stay away from Chase Claypool. I
think Claypool's still higher upside than Juju.
Yeah.
But he just hasn't been able to show anything going on this year in terms of even targets.
Yeah, until that kind of comes along, I would wait on Claypool. I don't think you drop him at all. I think you still keep him stashed.
Yeah.
But
when he's a big play guy, he'll get his big plays. He'll catch a stride. And
at some point.
You'll be good.
And then on the other side, you got the Bengals. I honestly don't want to bet on anybody but Joe Mixon. Mixon is a guy I wasn't high on, but he has definitely showed a lot of improvement in that he is the alpha of this entire team over the past 2 weeks. For now. But I mean,
just wait until your boy Captain America comes through.
But I mean, he's looking good, looking like the true RB1 that he was drafted to be.
I simply say it for now because of injuries as well.
Yeah, but then you look at Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. I think all 3 of those receivers, it's just a toss-up. Chase, at least the last 2 weeks, he's had those deep receptions, touchdowns. I just don't know.
I'm starting Higgins and Boyd in this game.
Yeah. I think
honestly,
the deep ball won't be as much of a factor in this game because they have Fitzpatrick sitting in the defensive backfield.
Chase is the one that's going to have a harder time in this matchup. You would think.
Yeah.
Obviously it's kind of a little bit of a crapshoot between the 3 as it is. But based on that, I would put probably Higgins, Boyd, Chase as my order for this week.
Yeah, I think
realistically you could flex if you needed on any of them though.
Yeah, and I also believe maybe it was last week I played Jamar Chase, which irritated me. Either way, I just don't want to see him do good. I don't know what it is. There was just so much hype, and I get annoyed with the amount of hype and things with rookies. And there was just so much on him.
No, yeah, it makes total sense, but I will say I am happy for him that he was able to kind of show that he's not just this automatic bust even before the year started. I thought that whole mantra was just stupid. I'm glad that he was able to kind of shut it up a little bit and to show that he's just fine and he's still at least a talent.
I think maybe my beef with him is I am a huge Justin Jefferson fan, and when people are like, he's going to come in and have a better rookie season than Justin Jefferson, who had one of the best rookie seasons of all time, and they're like, oh, well, he was better than him at LSU when they were both on the field together. I think that's my beef with him.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
After this year passes, I probably will be like, all right, I like Jamar Chase. He's not that bad. But until then...
I respect that more.
Yeah. So I think the Steelers still this week. But I think the Bengals definitely could make it interesting.
Yeah, this could be certainly a close one. We talked about division matchups usually end up a little tighter, a little closer to each other. But the Bengals just haven't shown me enough on the offensive side to be able to do anything consistently. Mixon with 49 attempts and about 200 yards. He's got one touchdown. Great, I guess. That's fine. I still don't think you're getting the value that you drafted him at. But that's just how it goes with a line like that. That's not completely fixed. Right. That's not completely set. And you're also going forward with Burrow, who's kind of struggling a little bit. 39 for 57, not the greatest amount of completion percentage. But you're also getting just short of 500 yards. That's fine. But that 4 touchdown to 3 interceptions ratio with 9 sacks already through 2 games, not encouraging.
And then we move on to the Ravens and Lions. There shouldn't be much to talk about in this game.
I will say before that's done too, Najee Harris, you should feel good now. If there was any bout of confidence that you needed, the pass game is always going to be there for him, right. And he showed that.
And he played well last week, and I don't think the Bengals defensive line is...
Oh, no. I just mean there's people worried about the efficiency of Harris's running right now.
Yeah.
Again, I don't entirely think that's his fault. We know that he was coming in with a bad offensive line. He was going to be there for opportunity, and he is coming through with said opportunity. I would expect that to establish in the run game more as he goes and develops. But the pass game, he's shown he is a true weapon.
Yeah, and the first 2 defenses they played, tougher defenses.
Yep.
The Raiders, more of a surprise with how good that defensive line actually is. So I think as they continue to go throughout the season, you're going to see more and more of Najee.
Yep.
So, yeah, like you said, not any concerns. So Ravens and Lions, I think Ravens should be able to walk away with this one. Lamar Jackson, you're always starting him. Pulled it all out last week.
Yep.
Looked real good. Tyson Williams, I mean, because it's the Ravens, there's a lot of opportunity to get touches.
Yep.
I don't know how confident I would be rolling him out as a running back 1 or 2.
I'd still flex him.
But, yeah.
He's still putting up a 50% snap share. Latavius Murray scored a touchdown in 2 games. He's looked good in his time, but he's not getting the usage that's going to take over him. Williams is still the guy. He was still the guy after his fumble that ultimately he lost the touchdown on to Duvernay. It's going to happen. The freak plays like that, but Devonta Freeman even coming in, he had 1 good run, but he only played in 10 snaps. Tyson Williams is still your guy going forward there.
Marquise Brown. Interesting, because I mean the last 2 weeks he's actually looked like, hey, I'm an actual wide receiver, guys. You can play me, which is not something you've seen, and I don't know how much longer it is going to last. I think it'll still be fine against the Lions, at least for the first half, because I see the Ravens getting out early and often on the Lions.
Yeah, I would expect a little bit more Mark Andrews hype coming forward. He's been a little quiet, 8 for 10 for 77 yards, 0 touchdowns thus far through 2 games. I would expect him to get in quite a little bit more over the middle, since the Ravens haven't played necessarily the toughest defenses. As you get into some tougher matchups there, and the run game is a little bit more stalled.
Yeah.
The main part of this offense, I think they're going to need the safety net. in a guy like Mark Andrews a lot more than Marquise Brown or Sammy Watkins.
Yeah. Jared Goff.
And also, just a note, sorry,
Okay.
both guys, in Watkins and Brown, also very injury prone. Both guys have had a lot of injury history, so we'll see how that develops over the season as well.
Right. So for the Lions, Jared Goff, DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams, TJ Hawkinson, Quintez Cephas has been the main wide receiver. I say hold off on Goff. I think you can still roll out Swift and Jamal Williams. And then obviously TJ Hawkinson's, he's working his way into that top three. He's kind of working George Kittle out of that top three. And
yeah, it's getting close. I mean, Kittle's still Kittle. I would still take him in terms of true talent and raw talent as it is. I would say he's easily taking over at 4 over where he was being drafted, where it was often Mark Andrews and Hawkinson. I think he's really sliding into 4 there so far.
all right, we're gonna burn through the rest of these. Jets Broncos. Jets. I would sell every single person. Maybe Michael Carter has a little bit of upside. I don't think for this week at all, but as the season goes on, we're seeing at least these first 2 games he's getting more and more involved and becoming kind of that back. But they still have Ty Johnson, who's getting a lot of work,
and also Tevin Coleman, who's just a factor to be there too and take.
I
take
think
any
they'll
sort of
phase
snaps.
out Tevin Coleman as the year goes on.
I wouldn't be surprised.
He
Funny
isn't looking
enough,
impressive.
the snaps, or I guess the actual rushing attempts between those 3 backs is 14 for Coleman, 16 for Johnson, and 15 for Carter.
Right. So they've been fairly balanced.
They are
but,
steady on that committee.
Yeah.
I will say too, just because I think it needs to be said, Elijah Moore, yeah, he might develop. Corey Davis, yeah, he looked great in the first week. He's going to have his games, but he's going to have games exactly like this, where it's even if he can't do anything about it, it's because of Zach Wilson is ultimately developing. But Braxton Berrios, he is developing really well in this offense. I would say that's bait at this moment. I wouldn't waste your waiver claim on him. I wouldn't go forward because ultimately you're just forgetting the fact that Jamison Crowder has been week to week and he's out. Right. He's expected to likely be back this week. I would think he's just going to slide right into that role, and with Moore and Davis ahead of him, that's just going to bump him a lot out of the roles of the true starters, if you will. Right. He's probably going to be the fourth receiver on the Jets team. And I don't exactly know of a 4th receiver on many teams, let alone the Jets, that are going to be too successful. So pump the brakes a little bit on Braxton Berrios there too.
And then the Broncos, Teddy Bridgewater, Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant, Tim Patrick. The Broncos haven't really ran the ball all that well. I mean, Gordon had that big long run week 1, but other than that, it's been more of the passing game. Teddy Twinkletoes looking real good, moving around in the pocket, extending plays. I think, I'm hopeful that Cortland Sutton continues to see the amount of targets that he had last week. Noah Fant, I think he's going to consistently be what he's been these past 2 weeks.
When he's used, he's good.
Yeah. And then Tim Patrick, I'm kind of still tossed up between KJ Hamler and Tim Patrick on who's going to kind of fill in that Judy role.
Yeah.
We saw Patrick last week score the touchdown, but Hamler is more of a Jerry Judy type, and we saw at least during the preseason, Bridgewater really liked Hamler. We just haven't really seen that.
I'm not sure fantasy relevance wise it matters by the time Judy's back.
Right. Yeah. So definitely, Judy should be in your IR slot if you had him at all.
Yes.
And again, put players like that in your IR slot instead of keeping them just on your bench, because while they're out, you can bring in somebody else to put on your bench. So, but Broncos, I think, take this game.
Yeah, I would say that's fairly readily, as odd as it is to see the Broncos at 3-0. I could see it happening just because they're playing the Jets. They have so many just broken pieces they're trying to develop right now. Wilson's probably going to have a better game than he did last week. I would bet on that easily. It may be closer. That all depends on how the run game of the Broncos holds out. Trying to run out the game. Ultimately, I would expect this to be a pretty quick game if they're going to run the clock almost the entire time.
Right.
But the Jets just don't have enough for me right now that I've seen to be able to have my faith.
Then we have the Dolphins and Raiders. If Tua doesn't go, it's going to be Jacoby Brissett.
He is out.
Okay, yes, we did see that. So it's going to be Jacoby Brissett.
Yep.
So then you've got Myles Gaskin, Devontae Parker, Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki. I think I go ahead and just fade all of these guys this week, especially against the Raiders.
If you have the option to, I would. Maybe play Waddle if you have to. I would feel more confident in him, but it's also to say there's a little bit of worry in that because Will Fuller just rejoined the team this week as well. So a lot more up in the air.
Yeah. And then on the Raiders side, I think Derek Carr, even if you're not streaming and you just have a weaker quarterback, I think, especially this week, he's not a bad start at all. Josh Jacobs is still labeled as very questionable. So I wouldn't expect, even if he does play, I wouldn't expect much from him. Kenyon Drake.
He was good in the pass game, I guess.
Yeah.
Good enough in the pass game to get you some points. Do not roster Peyton Barber. You would think you'd know this from previous years. You'd think you'd get that. Even if he's get the opportunity, it's just not there.
Right.
It's not worth your time.
That's a very good point. Because there's probably people that are like, well, if Josh Jacobs is out, they split between him and Kenyon Drake. They're going to split between Barber and Drake.
I'm all for opportunity, but it was bad. And it's going to be bad because he is bad.
Darren Waller.
Yes, always.
Obviously, I mean, 19 targets, it was first week, right? 19 targets.
Yeah,
Something
he was
saying.
just ridiculous. In the first half, he had like 12.
Yeah. But then it gets a little weird when you go to the wide receiver core. Henry Ruggs, Bryan Edwards, Hunter Renfrow. It's kind of all over the place.
All three have done well in their roles, but no one has necessarily established a ton. That's kind of the unfortunate part in terms of trying to go forward and start someone.
Right. I mean, Bryan Edwards, he pretty much got all of his work in one small portion of the game in week 1.
Yep.
Then you saw Ruggs last week catch a deep ball. Renfro's here and there.
Renfro's done, I would say, the most consistent between the three, just because that's kind of his role as the slot guy. He's the consistent check down, if you will, for Derek Carr, which unfortunately when you don't have your starting running back, that's going to happen more often than none. And when you can't throw to your running back more than a couple times to Kenyon Drake without having a full game plan, since they didn't know Jacobs was going to be out, it makes a lot more sense to go to him there. Honestly, if I had to start any of these receivers, though, I'm just going to go with Ruggs because of the high upside plays, and he showed that this last week.
And it's about time because we wanted some of that when he did play last year. And
I'm happy to see it for him.
So hopefully he continues to just be that role.
As of right now, too, it's only a 4-point spread. So if you can get down on this before they adjust for Tua being out, slam it.
For sure. I would still take the Raiders.
Yeah.
-4, so they'd have to win by 4, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so I think they still will win by 4.
I think that number's going to get adjusted.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying with Tua being out. If you can get to this number before that, slam it.
For sure. Then a game that I think is going to be really fun to watch, Buccaneers and Rams. Buccaneers have just looked phenomenal. Brady has 9 touchdown passes the first 2 weeks. Mike Evans got in on touchdowns last week. Gronkowski continuing to get in on touchdowns. Antonio Brown getting a lot of targets, at least in week 1. Last week, I think he only had 4 or 5. It was a smaller sample than week 1.
You're talking Gronk?
Antonio Brown.
Oh, Brown. Brown had...
And then you also have Chris Godwin in there.
Yep, yeah. Brown was 1 for 3 last week.
So 3 targets, yeah. So Gronkowski, I think he's going to be a set it and forget it for the rest of the season.
I would expect it. Yeah.
And again, all 3 of those receivers are just kind of a toss-up of
I think Godwin
get those targets.
Godwin has the safer floor
right.
Between him and Evans. Evans is a lot more touchdown dependent in my opinion. And you kind of see that just confirming it on the high side this week too with 2 touchdowns. But outside of that, he wasn't too crazy. But even 9 for 13 for 105 yards. Yeah, he's had a touchdown in both games. And the second one was 4 for 5 and 62 yards. That's Chris Godwin, that is.
Right.
I would still take the 4 for 5 for 62 and the 9 for 13 with 105. He's got a solid floor and high ceiling because of his touchdown looks. Mike Evans, on the other hand, he'll have those games where, he's going to go and put up 100 yards, but he'll also have a game like week 1 where he's 3 for 6 and 24 yards.
Right. Yeah.
And that's against Dallas. I mean, it's not necessarily a matter of matchup for him, too.
That's become more of what you should expect from Mike Evans because that's how it was last year.
Yeah, very much the norm.
Then on the Rams side, everything's looking real nice over there, I think. Matt Stafford finally in a position where he can put his gunslinging to use. Cooper Kupp has been the guy the past 2 weeks. Robert Woods,
I was drafting him over
there.
Woods to plan on him being better than Woods. I wouldn't take out Woods and say he's bad or in a bad spot and he won't have good games because he will. But Cooper Kupp is the guy.
If Darrell Henderson's out this week, Sony Michel takes over most of those touches. Do we think any higher of Sony Michel?
I would play Sony Michel.
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
I still don't think I'd play Michel.
I don't think he's great in terms of production necessarily, but again, that opportunity there in a high-flying offense, I would probably roll him out as a flex if you needed to, depending on what you're in comparison to. But a desperation flex, if you're going to say that.
The amount of targets to Henderson and Michel as compared to, everybody else in an offense that's throwing the ball quite a bit, I still just don't see a whole lot of upside in Michel. And again,
for what it's worth, they could be down in this game, so who knows? But if it's a tight game, they're probably not going to be running a ton. So I mean, I'm not excited about it. But if you had to start one, it'd be Michel for sure.
And then Tyler Higbee, he's been kind of quiet.
Good game the first one, not the second one.
Yeah, not terrible, but
if you can develop to a presence, then great.
I mean, if he scores a touchdown, then he's doing well for a tight end position.
Yep. If you're in a dynasty league as well, or a super, super, super deep league, which I don't imagine you do for that deep in redraft, but if you're in a dynasty league, Jacob Funk needs to be rostered. If you have a taxi squad, put him on there. He's still eligible. He is a guy that was a 7th round draft pick, I believe, and actually beat out Xavier Jones for the job, who was an undrafted one that was expected to be the guy before they traded for Michel, and now ultimately he's not even on the team anymore.
Right.
Part of that was because Funk had outworked him, and he did pretty well in the preseason. He had some nice showings. He's a solid talent. He did really good in college. I don't necessarily know if you're going to see him. He only had three snaps this last game, but he's worth being rostered. He needs to be on a dynasty roster for sure, just purely out of the opportunity. If he were to go in and 1 year, got to roster someone on dynasty if they're playing.
Right.
But also, if Michel goes down, he's had injury history of his own. That's going to be your guy.
And he's got a fun name.
Jake Funk.
Get funky.
Yes. The fantasy names are already they're coming.
I think I still would take the Bucks in this game. But I think this is going to be a really fun game to watch, and honestly, I think it'll be close because both defenses are good defenses. Yeah,
if the Rams had a better run game, I would look at it. Bucks have a really good run defense is the thing, so it doesn't matter a ton. But a really good rush defense versus a not so good running back, that's going to be potentially the difference there, especially when you look on the other side. The Bucks aren't able to run that much right now with not a lot of production in Fournette and Jones. But if you're able to go and pass, that's the biggest thing with Jalen Ramsey trying to take these guys out. It's up to the rest of the defense outside of Jalen Ramsey to see how much you can shut down Tom Brady and whether it's Mike Evans or whether it's Godwin or whoever Ramsey is not on at the time. That's really going to be the biggest difference of this game.
And Brady has a very quick release, so that'll neutralize Aaron Donald in that pressure. So, yeah, I think the Bucs.
It's a 1.5 spread here too.
Yeah, I think it's going to be probably the game of the week, in my opinion, to watch.
Easily.
Then you got the Seahawks and Vikings. Seahawks did lose last week in overtime to the Titans. But, again, Wilson looked fantastic. Lockett looked fantastic. DK Metcalf is almost quietly still doing good.
Yep.
I mean,
it's not the start of the season he had last year, that's for sure.
But it's not like he's going out and skunking at all. 15, 16 points, still good. Chris Carson.
He's still a guy. I'm telling you, he's gonna be the move this year.
I think he's still a running back one option, but I think this offense just passes so damn much that
I'd agree.
He's not gonna go out and give you a big bomb of a game.
I just think they have better matchups than what they've had. I mean, the Colts are a tough defense. We just talked about them earlier. The Titans aren't. They're up there, and then obviously it was a close game, so they were passing a whole bunch. He still got involved on the offensive end with 2 touchdowns. Chris Carson, that is. But going forward, you got the Vikings. The 49ers, we'll see what happens there. The Rams could be a little tougher. But otherwise, you got the Steelers, who aren't looking great. The Saints, who are up and down right now. The Jaguars, the Packers, the Cardinals, the Washington football team. I mean, you've got some really solid options for him to get involved there. And not to mention, getting late into the season, Texans, Rams, Bears, Lions is going to be roughly his playoff schedule there, depending on when you start. That's a good outlook to have right there.
He's somebody I've been trying to buy low, and the same guy, I believe, in 2 leagues has him, and just won't give him up.
I don't doubt it.
Sadly enough. And then you got the Vikings, Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and you got to mention KJ Osborne nowadays. Honestly, the way that the Vikings have held in games, like with the Cardinals last week, the Bengals, granted, it's the Bengals in week 1, I think they've got the tools to keep up in this game and make it interesting.
I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm definitely pulling the over on the Seahawks here, that's for sure.
Yeah. I think you can start all 3 of those wide receivers, honestly. Osborne being the lower of the tiers, just because I believe Adam Thielen still has a touchdown in this game. I think Justin Jefferson gets the bulk of the targets. But I think all 3 of them are viable fantasy options this week.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the Seahawks still in this game.
Is it concerning to you that Dalvin Cook has already gone down this year?
Not really. It's what I expect from Dalvin Cook. I expect something to maim him at some point in the season, if not multiple times in the season.
Well, they know it's coming 20-plus times a game.
Yeah.
And they, in my opinion, misuse him so hard, so it's fairly easy to figure out what he's doing. And unfortunately, with even outside of the injury history, you're gonna get hurt enough running into a brick wall 20 times a game.
Still produces, though.
Yeah, no, that's the thing is, I mean, if he's healthy, you're obviously taking him. He's been often a top 3 pick in fantasy there, so take him while you can because the opportunity is there.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that it's hard to personally as a player, not even in fantasy, to watch that happen year after year after year because it's just that's all I do with him.
Yeah, because unless you're built like Derrick Henry, you can't. And did we already pass the Titans game? Because I did want to throw out one thing I saw about Derrick Henry. It was his touch count from high school through college through the NFL. If you want to wonder about his durability, 300 touches every single year or more throughout high school, throughout college, and so far throughout the pros. The guy's built like a statue. I mean, he's...
Yeah. Well, people use that against him, too, and saying that he's got a lot of tread on him, too, but to me, it's a durability thing.
If you want to see a comparison, look at Zeke Elliott. He got that kind of touch count throughout college and throughout his first couple of years in Dallas, and he's already broken down. Yeah. And Henry is still continuing to just run through people. Yeah. So,
knocking on wood for him.
Yeah. I don't know if this is real wood. This might be real wood. I don't know. But
we'll find the nearest wood that is real.
And then we move on to Sunday night. Should be another fun one. The Packers and the Niners. Packers got back on track last week. Aaron Jones, Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Robert Tonyan got in the end zone. Mm-hmm. I think all of these guys are still good to go for any one spot on your team.
Yeah, I would agree.
Jones, I don't know if he's going to have another close to 45-point game, but...
No, but I would expect Devonta Adams to return a little bit more to normalcy. Maybe add, even if it's one touchdown to his stat line with like the 8 for 120. That would be a little bit more normal for him.
If he gets a stat line from last week and a touchdown, that'll help me out in the big matchup where the projections are very high for both of us.
Yeah.
So I would love to see it. And I had to laugh at the announcers saying Aaron Rodgers, when he met Robert Tonyan, asked him what his name was and just immediately started calling him Bobby and has called him nothing but Bobby. So Bob Tonyan.
Bobby Tonyan has a ring to it, I'll be honest.
It does. I think he should officially just change his name on rosters.
Might as well, yeah.
Then you got the 49ers, who that running back room is looking terrible. But here's what I wanted to talk about with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. With the running back situation just being so out of whack, and they have just Elijah Mitchell, honestly, right now. Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are both guys who can run the football. And with Kyle Shanahan being extremely creative, I think for the next few weeks we'll see a lot of end-arounds or ways to get those two the ball in their hands.
If they can get Ayuk healthy, yeah.
And that makes both of them very valuable.
Well, even if Ayuk's out, you still are not in full usage.
Yeah.
Deebo, you can for sure use him in that role. I wouldn't be opposed to Trent Sherfield. He's a quick guy.
Yeah.
You'd be just fine. Mohamed Sanu has actually been used in that role quite a bit back in his Bengals days. Obviously, everyone knows that he used to be a quarterback too, and he could throw because he's had some of those end-around passes. Maybe they get a little tricky. It's Sunday Night Football. Anything can happen.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to watch. And I'm honestly excited to see what the 49ers do, having to dig into that bag of tricks and figure out something to keep that offense going without a lot of running backs. And
well, if they're doing that, you got to wonder how much Trey Lance is going to be involved here, because he didn't even get a snap this last game.
I don't know. I find it, as long as Jimmy G keeps playing the way that he has played these first 2 weeks, I don't see...
I'm not talking taking him on at quarterback. I'm just saying
involving Trey Lance,
running him like you did the first game or in the preseason, where it was a little bit of a mix of both. I wouldn't be surprised to see that.
It'll be interesting to see how it goes, but either way, exciting game to watch.
Yeah, this will be another good one.
And then honestly, the Monday night game as well. You got the Eagles and the Cowboys.
Who are you taking in the Niners one?
I think...
I'm going Packers.
I want to go Packers, but I don't want to go right off the flash of the pan from last week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but with the Niners running back problems and having to be more creative, I think I'll take the Packers as well. But the Eagles and Cowboys, I think this is going to be a fun game to watch too.
Oh, yeah.
I think
the old division.
So the Eagles' defense looks really good, but they haven't necessarily played the best of opponents.
Yep.
And the Cowboys' offense, that was supposed to look really good last week against the Chargers, didn't necessarily look all that great. But I think it's going to be an offensive game. I think both teams offensively will be dynamite.
Yeah, well, I mean, like we said with the Washington football team and the Giants, it's a team where a matchup where it could easily be 13-14 or 313-314. I mean, it's two teams that have some dynamic players on their teams. I wouldn't be surprised to see both of them or one of them go out. It could be a blowout, but these teams, there's always a chip on their shoulder. This is another bigger matchup. This is probably the biggest rivalry between these two teams in the division. I would expect it to be pretty chippy all the way through, and I would expect it to be a solid matchup all the way through.
I'm excited about Jalen Hurts. I've been excited about him for the season. And him and Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith didn't really do a whole lot last week, but I will blame that on myself anytime I bring a player onto my team, because that was actually part of my Antonio Gibson trade.
Oh, sure. Okay.
And anytime I bring somebody onto my team, the first week they just don't really do anything.
He's not quite fantasy relevant yet, but Watkins.
He was first week.
Well, I'm saying Kes Watkins is. He's fun to watch.
Yeah.
But no, Devonta Smith. I'm still starting him. Honestly, I would flex him. I have confidence in him going forward. He's got a great connection with Hurts. He's established himself as the number one, which was a little bit of a question early on. Devonta Smith is a talent, and he's shown it. He's got opportunity. Not a ton of defense on the Cowboys side. They've given up plenty, as we saw in the game against the Buccaneers. That was when several receivers went off there. Right. So I could easily see the same thing there if they're able to take advantage. Devonta Smith would be a solid play there.
Do we think Dallas Goedert has a bounce back this week?
I think he certainly could, yeah. I mean, middle of the field, there's some big name linebackers there with Jalen Smith and Van Der Esch with the Cowboys, but they've all had their own issues at the same time. If he becomes a bit more of a release as Jalen Hurts rolls out, I think that could certainly be an issue for the Cowboys.
For sure. And then we move on to the Cowboys. I think a bounce back from Dak, Amari, CD. I think all of those guys will be just fine this week. I think you start all of them.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily go and plan on them all going off again.
No.
But
I think the passing game itself is just going to be more productive than it was last week. Where I run into a problem is between Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard has outdone Zeke 2 weeks in a row. On the ground, through the air, and Zeke's just looking like he's beat up and needs new tires. Like, he's kind of sliding around.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like he looks terrible, but he does not look as good as Tony Pollard.
No, that's the thing is it's kind of hard to go forward with one trending up and one trending down and still play Zeke at the rate that you were previously. Right. A little bit worrisome in fantasy if you're a Zeke owner. Maybe if you own both, which you should if you're the Zeke owner anyway. But not exactly a bout of confidence there. I'm sure he'll be fine. He still managed to do pretty well with his reps last week. But I wouldn't anticipate Pollard overtaking him more than 50% by any means. But you're not exactly drafting a first-round running back like Zeke to play 50% of the snaps either.
Right.
So it's a tough position to be in. I'll be honest.
Interesting thought. If you don't have Tony Pollard, because in two of my leagues, I was able to pick up Tony Pollard this week. Mm-hmm. At what point would you consider, if things continue, trading Tony Pollard to a Zeke owner, or as a Zeke owner, trading for Tony Pollard is what I...
I mean, I would explore it, as long as you're not going to be in a position where they're going to make you overpay.
Right.
Realistically, again, trying not to overreact is the biggest thing, too. If I'm the Pollard owner, I'm trying to make that trade, force it down their throat immediately. The odds that Pollard has another game as good as this, I don't think is super high. The Chargers' defense aren't necessarily the best defense of a standard there, and they're going to have some tougher games coming up with the Cowboys. So I would try to force that right now, because you look at it kind of the same thing as the Falcons and what they had with Davis and Patterson. Pollard only played 34% of snaps. Zeke was still a 71% snap share.
But
he's going to be just fine.
I think because of that discrepancy, and Pollard still outscoring Zeke 2 weeks in a row for fantasy purposes, especially last week having a 100-yard game.
Yeah.
I think Pollard is the actual way to go in that backfield.
Maybe
a hot take, but
yeah,
I wasn't high on Zeke to begin with, and just from seeing Tony Pollard the last 2 weeks, even last year, Pollard looked really good at the end of the season, and I think he's carried that over. I think he's the guy.
I mean, I wouldn't ultimately be surprised. I'm not a big Zeke guy as it is. Never really have been. His production has always just kind of annoyed me, and I think last year was a little bit of a red flag of possibly things to come. He hasn't had fumble issues this year yet, right. So that there's that factor going on too. If he were to go in Ronald Jones it, would he be in that Ronald Jones role where it's going to kind of be, fine, we'll sit you, we'll doghouse you, and we'll
I don't
play
think
Tony
anybody's
Pollard.
as mean as Bruce Arians in that aspect.
No, but I'm saying in a point where if he fumbles once or twice in a game, you could see that uptick to where it is over, he overtakes on that 50-50 spot. That could get interesting, and obviously with a lot of doubt you create for not just that game, but for the next game too.
Right.
That's kind of a tough position to be in. Like I said, I know they got some easier games coming up with the Eagles, the Panthers, the Giants, the Patriots, the Vikings, the Broncos, the Falcons, before they play the Chiefs
you keep
later
talking
on.
about these Broncos games being easy games. I don't think so, sir.
Easier. But even outside of them, the Vikings, the Giants in there could be easier. The Panthers could be. For that to say too, the Eagles have done pretty well. We'll see what that looks like. The Panthers have done pretty well. We'll see what that looks like. Giants, the same thing. Patriots could have a decent one. Vikings aren't looking great. Broncos could have a decent one. Falcons aren't looking great. Same thing with, again, the Chiefs, the Raiders, the Saints. All of these are ones with possible production where they could be good, they could be not. That's where I think they're going to have to rely on old reliable and Zeke there. But ultimately more doubt than you're going to be comfortable with.
Right.
If you can make a move, I don't necessarily know if now is the time,
Right.
because you're going to be selling at the lowest possible value. Unless you're going to get Pollard. But in terms of moving Zeke, wait until you get a week and then do it. Maybe 2 weeks of consistency, and then evaluate if you're going to feel comfortable going forward with his role, or if you're going to try and move him from the name and the recency production.
Yeah, if I had him, I'd wait for the flash in the pan week and get rid of him. Is where I would be sitting with that situation. But as for the game, Cowboys or Eagles?
I'm probably going to take Cowboys here just because of the actual options that they have. Whether it is at both running backs, they can run out the game fairly comfortably. I think, like I said, I think it'll be Zeke kind of establishing a little bit more in this game, especially due to the recent injuries to the Eagles and their offensive line too, and as well as Brandon Graham tearing his Achilles. I think they're going to be able to run a little bit easier if it came down to it late, but also if they needed to pass and come back or keep up with the Eagles. Amari Cooper looked fantastic. CeeDee Lamb has obviously flashed his speed and his skill. He's going to be fantastic. Eagles, I don't believe in Miles Sanders quite as much, and I also think outside of Devonta Smith, they don't have a ton of reliability either.
Right.
So I'm going to go with Cowboys here, especially in what's only a 3.5 spread.
Yeah, I would go Cowboys as well. As you said, just more options. Yeah.
I will say that Miles Sanders is actually number 1 in the NFL in broken tackles this far, though.
That's actually an impressive stat.
He's got 11. McCaffrey has 10, and Carson and Mixon have 9.
I love Andy Holloway.
I just saw him tweeted yesterday, so I had to bring it up.
Yeah. Anything else going out of these games?
Kevin Stefanski just said he expects Odell to be a full go at practice. So if you're leaning Browns in that game and you need even more of a reason with Jarvis Landry hitting the IR to go over against the Bears, you can lean a little more comfortably now as they are starting Justin Fields on the Bears end.
Correct. All right. Yeah, so that is it for today's show.
A lot of fun matchups this week.
It is. It's going to be a fun week. Probably, if you're picking games competitively, probably going to be an annoying week again this week.
Oh, yeah.
But football-wise, watching it, it's going to be a lot of fun. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Go on over to Dustin's Twitter. Keep up on things going on with his show. You can catch them on Wednesdays. Actually, you can catch them
Yep, catch them today.
You can catch them yesterday.
Yeah. The time this is out. But yeah, find us on Facebook at Caught in the Current. We'll post all the links and everything on there, and we'll also be able to have all of our polls and all of our articles that we post, and join the fun with us.
And then you can follow all of the links for this show right here. And look out for something new, actually. Being that this show has gone pretty long, I think it's going to be a separate bonus episode that will be either weekly or bi-weekly. So keep a lookout for that. And you know what, everybody? Just good luck in your fantasy matchups this week. Wish me luck. I've got 2 big matchups coming, one of which is big because I need a win in this league. But good luck in yours. Let us know how you do. And tune in next week.